just hang on. Just don't say anything. I mean, say whatever the fuck you want. It's your show, but
all right. Well, I'm just gonna go because we're live now.
Okay. How do you know that?
Well, I hit live on the podcast.
We're live. We're not live. We're recording now.
You're recording. Okay. Well, we are now live on the internet. So let's do it. What's up, fellas?
Welcome to Game Night, everyone. This is episode 7, and as you can see, we're with the Agent of Chaos, gracing us with his presence. David Jaffe, is it?
You goddamn right it is. You goddamn.
How you doing, my friend?
It is chaotic. Do you remember when Joaquin Phoenix was doing that weird documentary and people thought he was out of his fucking mind?
Yes,
I do.
Do that
with Casey Affleck. Can you turn your mic up again a little bit though? Sorry, you've gotten quieter again.
Well,
I don't know what happened.
Is that better? Test. I can turn it up even more. Hang on.
I think this is volume chaos. I think turn it up a little bit more.
All right, you got it. 1 second.
Fucking microphones.
Input device, and you are.
Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, we did do this beforehand. Something changed.
Something changed.
It's the ghost in the machine, man.
I know, it's always that way. All right, input. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, there you go. How's that?
There we go.
That's much better.
Okay, cool.
Good.
All right, I'm here. I'm glad to be here. Thank you guys for having me on game night on a Friday. It's good to see you guys.
Yeah. Sorry to take up your Friday.
No, it's 5:30 here. I don't know where you guys live, but here I'm still working.
Yeah, no. I mean, what does time even mean? Like time of day, weekend? I don't know anymore.
Just say it, Eric. I know you want to get it off your chest.
Well, you want me to say time is a flat circle? You want me to say that, don't you? Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to co-opt True Detective here.
And this is one of our co-hosts here, Eric Kane. How you doing, brother?
Hello. Always happy to be here. Yeah. So yeah, I guess here we are. We're going to talk about God of War. We're going to fuck around for a little bit, and I guess we're going to live stream this, which is a new thing for us.
Live streaming right now.
Yeah, this is a first for us. And I'm Jason Rose, one of the hosts. I reached out to Mr. Jaffe here, and he was kind to join us and agree. And I think we're going to have an exciting show here and delve into some stuff that maybe you people haven't heard before.
What do you mean, you people?
Yeah,
sorry,
the 50, 60, however. And you brought out the Gandalf pipe. Wonderful. I can't, you know what? I'm going to get the full experience here. The whole Agent of Chaos.
So here's bad news. My daughter started smoking cigarettes because her boyfriend does. And I'm trying to get her to stop. But every now and then it's nice to go outside and sit out on the stoop with her and she'll smoke a cigarette. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go, because I haven't smoked a pipe since I was a kid. And I'm like, I want to get a real pipe now and smoke real tobacco out of it. Not a lot, just from time to time. People are saying the sound is off. Make sure I'll fix that.
I was just about to tell you that, but I didn't want to interrupt. It just keeps going down.
Okay, here's what we're going to do.
There's like that tiny hole in the inflatable mattress, and
the air is going out.
It goes up, and then it...
All right. Well, I'm going to rebroadcast this from OBS, so we're not going to stop the podcast, but you'll see it streaming in about 5 minutes, and the sound should be fine. So if you're watching the stream, it'll be right back. So, all right. Let's keep going though. We can keep going.
No problem. So I'm looking. Wait,
no, I want to hear the story about the cigarettes because my daughter vapes. Yeah. So,
well, my kids vape. Both my kids vape, but it was, but it's the cigarettes. So she met this guy. She started dating this guy, nice guy. But I guess he smokes and she picked up the horrible habit, even though she knows it's terrible. So every now and then though, I'll be like, I'm outside and she's out there and I'm like, oh, and it's like, that's the one thing I will give credit to cigarettes for, whether it was working at Sony and like my boss at the time was a big smoker. So, or my brother would smoke. So when he came up from LA or down from LA, he'd be out in the driveway smoking and stuff. It's a nice social aspect of just like a nice kind of hang with someone, just to sit there. Cigarettes almost a perfect length for like, it's not too long of a conversation, but it's not like, it's just like a, hey, what's up? So I dig that actually. I like that component of it, but the rest of it's absolute rubbish and horrible and terrible.
And it always gave you an excuse at work to go. Like
smokers
get the privilege. Oh, I need a smoke break. Everyone's like, oh yeah, makes sense. Everyone's like, well, where's my normal break? because they got
I
like
need a
break,
fresh air break.
lunch break, but then they had like these little 5-minute cigarette breaks, and it was like, well, where's mine?
But a lot of us would, I mean, I didn't smoke, but a lot of us would get a lot of work done on those breaks. So perhaps that was sort of where that's where they kind of used the excuse of like, oh, well, it's not a real break because we were out there doing meetings, and we were. I mean, to the credit of my boss, we go out there and smoke, but we'd be talking game design and all kinds of other malarkey. So,
Well,
you know what I say with like, so my daughter will vape, and like everyone her age vapes, and they're always vaping like all the time. Like they vape while they're watching TV, they vape inside, they vape while they're driving. Like when we smoked cigarettes back when I was a young hooligan, you had to go outside, you had to go like take time to do that. We didn't just smoke inside and make
well,
everything smell
it doesn't
nasty.
smell right. That's the nice thing about a lot of the vapes.
It's nice, but it's like they're doing it constantly, so there's just so much nicotine. And I'm like, maybe you should treat it like a cigarette. Go outside, smoke your
My
vape.
kids vape the pot though. They don't vape only one of them smokes nicotine, and that's through an actual cigarette. But my other kid, hey baby, speaking of, oh baby, I'm on no, not right now. She wants a fucking cigarette. I have them hidden, so she has to come to me to get them, so she doesn't go overdo it. And she'll no. All right. Anyway.
This is already starting off exactly the way I wanted it to.
The nicotine is a powerful drug, man.
It is.
When one time I would only smoke when I was drinking, and I'd hidden a pack of cigarettes from myself. And so then I was drunk one night, and I was like, where did I hide those cigarettes?
Oh, okay. So
because I hid them like
you would forget. You were aware.
So I hid them like a while back, and I looked everywhere. I was like, I know I put a pack somewhere. And I was like, I gave up. I wanted one so bad, but I just gave up. And I walked over to this counter, and I leaned over the counter, and we had this ice bucket, like a fancy ice bucket. And I looked down, and inside the ice bucket was the pack of cigarettes that I'd hidden weeks before. And I was like, oh, motherfucker, here we go.
Oh, so they were still good.
They were still fine, yeah.
I used to hide them in the TARDIS behind me from Doctor Who, because that was the one place. It was weird. The kids never looked. I didn't hide cigarettes when they were little, but they would never ever look in the fucking TARDIS, and that was like the perfect spot. And then eventually, I'm like, okay, I am disappointed in you guys. Look, and they're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, it opens. It's bigger on the inside, you morons. But it is what it is. Okay. We'll get it working. Don't worry. If it streams, it streams. If not, it's your show. We're going live. You've got it recorded.
No problem. So we're here and we're recording now.
Yeah, right.
But you are very quiet still, unfortunately.
I don't understand.
Just a hint.
Yeah.
Okay. Hang on.
It's like you go back, you go up.
I've been looking for the full Jaffe experience.
You're not wrong. It keeps going. Right. Exactly. Right. Okay. So I'm going to leave this on screen, and I'm going to see if it drops, because right now I've got it set to 46, and it should not move. We'll see what happens.
Computers don't usually like auto drop volume. No, it's good so far.
Okay. Let's keep it where it is.
If it drops, I'm going to do
I'll just pop it back up.
Like,
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Well, this is what I wanted out of this podcast, because the Agent of Chaos that I listened to on Last Stand and all your podcast with the Moriarty and everybody over there, I get an absolute kick out of them. Just how they're going like our audio right now, just like that.
Yeah. Does Colin's podcast often have major audio issues as well?
No.
They're actually on the ball, but just listening. Jaffe has this wonderful way of just taking a podcast 2 to 3 minutes in, and it goes from something, and then they're talking about labia. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, the thing I will say about it though is, I mean, to Colin's credit, he's got like a small little staff, and for me, it really is just me, and so I'm putting out. I'll do sometimes 3 videos a day, or I'll do 2 streams a day, or I'll do I'm constantly creating this shit. And, but I don't have any help. I mean, I'm paying outside people. It doesn't matter. The point is that like the audio is my weakest thing. I don't understand it. I don't know how, other than the little bar, to determine if it's, who cares? That's not interesting. Fuck that. Here's what I'm trying to learn, fellas. I'm trying to learn how to hang on to the essence of my ADD soul and go with the flow, but at the same time have the sort of metacognizance, which may be an oxymoron or a contradiction. No, it's not a contradiction, probably an oxymoron, but to have the cognizance of still being able to edit in real time, right? Because sometimes going off the rails is a great deal of fun and it's a great deal of value for the listener. And other times it's like, dude, shut the fuck up and get back to where you're at. And I don't have control over it at the moment, but I'd like to acquire that skill. Some people are great at it. Kevin Smith is great at it. I mean, I've seen him live. He goes for 4 hours, and I know he does it a lot. So a lot of stories are repeat stories. So he's kind of got his shtick down, but still there are people who are really good at just getting up there and being live and still being consistently engaging and entertaining. Clearly by the look on both of your faces, I'm not one of those people, but I do appreciate and respect that type of individual. Would you fight Mike Tyson?
I'm just kidding.
Would you fight Mike Tyson at 57? I would. I mean, depends on the money, right?
Well, what's the money?
We're talking about, Jake Paul or whatever.
Paul. Yeah, I don't know how much he's getting paid. He's probably getting paid a shit ton.
And the exposure, just even more exposure.
Like I saw Tyson fight Roy Jones. He didn't fight like he was training. I just think at this point he's interested in putting on these mild exhibitions where he'll give flashes. He's not going to go out there and try and knock this kid out. He's just not. And
I wish he would. I think that would be fun.
Oh God, I wish he would too.
Yeah.
But you know what? I will give those two like actual fighter guys. Like I've listened to Rogan talk when he's like, you can't take anything away from these kids. You may not like them, and I know a lot of people don't. They've give you a lot of reason not to like them, but that's part of the boxing game. But these kids have put in the work. They're training extremely hard.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they look fantastic. Maybe they're on a bunch of PEDs. I don't know, but they have put in the work, and they move relatively well.
Logan's in the WWE and he's great in it. I mean, as much as I don't like the shtick of those guys, watching him fight or, quote fight, whatever, entertain and as a WWE character, he came out instantly. It wasn't like, Ronda Rousey when she came to the WWE and it was like, a lot of people would argue she still hasn't really ever kind of gotten the vibe of it. I mean, he came out and he was just like, shit, it's like he's been doing this for 10 years. He's excellent at it. So I don't deny them the value they bring. I just find most of that kind of YouTube culture super obnoxious. I mean, they're kind of old now, comparatively speaking, to that game. Yeah. Where compared to who's the guy, Jack Dougherty or something, little fucking obnoxious kid that intentionally goes around with the bodyguard and pisses people off. And
that is the worst. Other than reaction videos, those are the worst things on the internet. It is the bottom barrel of YouTube,
and that's part media. Of what the trolls like. They like that we hate it, and that's why they do it. I get it. But I still want someone to punch the fuck out of that kid. I don't want him to get disfigured. I don't want him to get permanently damaged. I just want to know that he felt a great deal of pain in his stupid
maybe
face.
he'll become a boxer like the previous generation of YouTubers.
He's too tiny.
Yeah, but I mean, who knows? Maybe it'll be tiny boxing. That is the next big thing.
There's tiny the new boxing. Thing. Tiny boxing.
Unfortunately, this stuff in North America, we become so soft that we accept this. Yet you get a guy going to Japan. There was that Somali Joe or whatever, and he was just bugging average day people.
Samoa Joe?
No, well, Samoa Joe is the wrestler, but he was a Somalian kid, and he went to Japan just to do this, basically the same sort of comment or content, and just bother average day. And I mean, I've been around Japanese culture. I've never been there, but they're quite reserved and they're going to keep to themselves. This guy would fuck with them all the time. And eventually the cops just arrest him. Now they're throwing him out of the country. Like,
good.
That's what Logan Paul did too. He went to Japan and did a bunch of shit. But I mean, there's a lot of great stuff on YouTube. There's a lot of really, really awful, obnoxious shit on YouTube.
YouTube is amazing, though. I was sitting there the other night. We were all watching TV, the family, and my ex-wife was here, and she got up to go to the kitchen or something, and me and my son were watching. And I just saw this thing that got served up. It was like somebody talking about these toys from when I was a kid called the Adventure People. So I'm 52. This was back in the 70s. And, I used to love those. But the fact that this motherfucker was able to make a channel and get 80,000 to 250,000, I forget, people in the world to go, I'm interested in that. And I think back to when I was a kid and we had 3 channels and PBS, and it was like, you had to jump through all these hoops to get anything on television. It was like, oh my God, somebody wants to let me make my show. And now it's like, go fuck yourself. I'll do whatever the fuck I want to do.
And that is the great thing.
It's excellent.
It's a gift and a curse sometimes, but more gift in that way that it gives voice to too many people. But yeah, like we're all, I mean, I'm a little bit younger than you. I'll be 45 in April. Eric, you're how old?
150.
What you look at.
It'll pass.
Yeah.
No, and speaking 42, of the YouTube, but so we're all cut from the same cloth, so to speak, in terms of that mindset. But in terms of the YouTube thing, Jaffe, like what made you get started and want to do it?
Well, I'll tell you what, I started with the blog, and I started with the blog back when we were doing development on the first God of War. And the internet was still only 10 years, right? I mean, the very first thing that I ever had on the internet related to me was Sony when they launched the PS1. They did this really, I mean, to look at it now, I don't even know if the Internet Archives have it, but it was like this sort of text adventure, choose your own adventure game about all the launch window titles for PlayStation, right? It was nothing. I mean, they probably, God knows how much they paid, but it was like they were trying to get their first feet into that world. And so this was only 8 years after that, right? So it was like, the days of Ain't It Cool News was like a big deal. And it was kind of, I mean, it's so crazy to be nostalgic for that shit now, but it's like, that's where we were. And I was reading Will Wheaton's blog from Star Trek. I mean, he was off Star Trek, and I loved his blog, and I loved his writing, and I loved his books. He's become a bit of a more, people change, and I still got nothing against Will Wheaton, but he does seem to be a little, I feel for the guy. He deals with depression and stuff. But anyway, point is I really liked that idea of here I am, connecting with this person. I never met him, but here I am connecting with this person and really sort of enjoying that connection, enjoying, the slice of life that he shared. So I figured, I'll do that with video games. And I started doing that, and I just liked it, and I remember, it would get me into trouble sometimes working at Sony, where PR wouldn't like this, or I'd say something about the team and it wasn't meant to be an insult, but some people took it as an insult, and we had to kind of do damage control. And, I remember though, at the time driving around Santa Monica with my wife, and I was like, maybe I should kill the blog. And I said, but there's just something about it that tells me I shouldn't. There's just a voice saying, keep doing it. And so I knew then there was something about this medium, even though at the time that was text for the most part, that I just liked that instantaneous connection. So I imagine it had something to do with, I've always liked to put on shows, whether they're video games or trying to make movies or something like this, or doing little radio shows with my friends, on the stereo when we were kids. What I loved about it once I started doing the streaming stuff though, and the YouTube stuff though, specifically, is the immediacy of it. And especially if you've been in video games for as long as I had, and you were sort of at the creative captain's chair for most of those years, having an idea might happen, in 1994, but you don't get to see it executed in people's hands and them responding until 1997. So you've got all of this tenacity and discipline that's required to stay with that idea, stay with that passion, and see it through the finish line. And this has become, people get mad at me on our Discord because it's like, oh, Jaffe's trying a new format. Jaffe's trying this. Jaffe's trying that. And I'm probably more loosey-goosey than I should be if I really want to be successful. But there's a real joy to that. It reminds me a lot of when you hear actors say, of course I love doing the movies and stuff, but it's stage work that they love the most because there's an immediate connection with the audience. And I think, to me, I don't look at my YouTube stuff any different than the video games I worked on. I know the medium is different, but it's still about sort of, hey, here's something I got in my head. Here's something I think is cool. Do you think it's cool? And so I vibe with that a lot. I adore it. And I hope I can eventually become successful with it enough that I can continue doing it without having to do anything else if I don't want to. I don't make the kind of money a lot of these big YouTubers do, not even close. But, there are days where I go, I think I can maybe make a go of this professionally, in a little bit. But then I kind of self-destruct it because I just won't play the game. I know I could have a much bigger following, but I don't like putting up with idiots.
I
And I don't
relate
like
to that so much. You have just to all of that so much. Just the like you
what
said, like
part.
the immediacy of it. You know, I've
I
been a
like how he
blogger
says.
for
I like how he says. I relate to that so much, all of it, and then I say, "What part?" You're an idiot, Jaffe. Anyway, go ahead. All of it, Jaffe. You
well,
fucking
all of
moron.
it, yeah, all of it. Other than I have, you know, I wasn't a game director or anything like that, but just like the idea, you know, of I like getting my thoughts out
Yeah,
and having a conversation with people right now. Like I want to write that blog post or I want to make that video about this thing that's in my head right now
yeah, yeah.
and talk about it. It's also why I can't ever stop replying to commenters. A lot of people say
It's
don't read the
yes,
comments, but I read the comments and I reply to all of them. Not
You
all of
got
them,
to
a
stop.
lot of them. And I get in a lot of fights because of it.
Mhm.
But like I really like that
It's
they
fun.
like
It's entertaining.
yeah, it is. And I
Like
like
a
to sit down
mental
and I'm like,
barroom
wow,
brawl.
I was on a hike. I had this crazy thought about this thing. I connected these two things. I'm going to go make a video about it. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to write something about it. That immediacy. Whereas, like, I sit down to like write the novel I've wanted to write all
Yeah,
these years, and I'm like, oh, motherfucker, I can't. This is boring. Like, you know, like
yeah.
so I totally relate to what you're saying in that
I'm with
regard.
you.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
Mine is just, I mean, unlike you two, I mean, Eric, you write professionally. Javi, you've created incredible things,
stuff.
and now you're doing this. I mean, I've written a bit, but that's really I'm at an arm's length from an industry that I've loved since I've been 6 years old. But
Right.
that doesn't mean the immediacy for me to do it is here. I mean, me connecting with Eric has been a boon for me because now it's really starting to become a thing that we do more of, and the immediacy is getting something there for me. But yeah, I just talking about this stuff just gets me going. I love it. I wish I could do it more. I'm just time is my enemy, like all of us. But I have two children. One's 3, one's 1.
Yeah.
I have no fucking time
Oh
for
yeah.
anything. Like I'm trying to write children's book. I'm writing a video game. I run my own business. Look, we're all busy. I'm not like trying to say I'm some
No,
heavy
I've
case.
I've had small kids before. You
One of
know.
my pet peeves in fucking life is when I'm busy and busy. We're all busy. We're all
yeah,
busy. If you want it to happen, you will make it happen. But
That's true. I
and
remember
in terms
being
of
on
your
God of War, and my kids were your kids' age because I have two years apart. And Terry Smith, one of our art directors, was talking to me about what his kids did. They were about maybe 6 and 8, or 6 and 5 or something. A little bit older than mine, but they were still little kids. And he was talking about on Saturdays, him and his wife would sleep in, and the kids would get up and pour themselves cereal and watch cartoons. And I just thought that sounded like, Xanadu or Valhalla. I was just like, you mean you can sleep in? And these motherfuckers get up
yeah,
and
I don't know what that is.
right. But eventually it happens and you're like,
uh-huh.
oh, ooh, this is
And then they
amazing. And
become
then,
teenagers and they're
yeah.
off driving themselves around and you're like, that's awesome that you can drive, but also what the fuck are you going to get into and what kind of damage are you going to do?
It's a little weird having kids who were in their teen primes during the COVID though,
Yeah. Oh
because
yeah.
they missed out on so much of that. A lot of this generation of Gen Z kids, it's the lowest amount of driving
Yeah.
that they just don't have an interest in it. There's a
A
lot of
lot of
things that
stuff
make
like
them.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of it, and driving's one of them. But my son went the other night with his friends. They drove from San Diego to Irvine to see Fall Out Boy,
Nice.
and that's the farthest he's ever been in a car with his friends. That
How old
late
is
at
he?
night. He's 18.
He's 18. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
but I mean, again, they were
Yeah, that's fine.
housebound
Right.
for like two and a
Yeah.
half years because of the pandemic. So they're kind of almost like living out their 16-year-old lives
Right.
at 18 in terms of some of these experiences that most kids
Yeah.
our age
Oh
had
yeah.
in high school
Well,
and stuff.
my daughter was in junior high. She was in 8th grade when for the shutdowns. Seventh to 8th grade. Like
Yeah, she
so.
probably missed a lot.
Yeah, a lot. And I think it like from what I've seen, like schools everywhere have just changed since then. So like that time that was like junior high is fucking horrible. Like it's the worst time,
Mhm.
right? But missing junior high means that a lot of those kids missed like
The
developing
social,
through
yeah.
that horrible social time. So then that almost carries over a bit with this extra layer of antisocial bullshit into high school. And it's just a mess. And I have a friend who's a math professor and teaches these kids who are just getting into, first year math and stuff. And he says that like he'll walk into the class and there'll be, 40 kids sitting there on their phones. Nobody's talking to anybody. And this was not the case, even though people had smartphones and social media and all that before the pandemic. That was not the case
Yeah,
beforehand. And so
I
it's created
think,
this weird new atmosphere around everything.
yeah, I mean, I absolutely, and I think it's at my age, which is I don't feel old at all. I feel like I found a picture recently of when I graduated high school, walking across the stage to get my diploma. I still feel exactly like that person.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we're,
It's that
I've got
doesn't
that.
go anywhere. Maybe, but my point though is that it's like, but you know, I feel I don't feel old, but I definitely feel of my generation online a lot of times because the references and the language and it's almost reminds me of like when you would hear like when the beatniks came up in the 60s and the all buttoned up parents who were like Lawrence Welk fans were like what are these crazy phrases they're using and stuff. So that's been pretty fun and weird. But the one thing I love about their generation, though, and I think the internet is partially responsible, if not mostly responsible, is they seem much more aware of a lot of the bullshit. Like schools
Mm,
no longer can hold, like high schools no longer, I think, have the same sway over these kids. They don't have the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads of if you don't do well, it'll go on your record and you won't go to
yeah,
college. The negative part is they
absolutely.
wouldn't have any idea what the fuck the sword of Damocles is. So these are the problems.
It's
There's
a
been
Sophie's choice.
right. Well, yeah, I love that. Did you see that Ricky Gervais joke where he's like, "Oh, they're going to make a sequel," and all it is Meryl Streep looking at the other kid, going, "Well, it's got to be this one then."
I've not
Yeah,
seen that, but that's pretty funny.
yeah. But
Oh my god.
yeah, but anyway, though, so point being is like things like college, things like the company they know they're wise to the ways we weren't. The company's not going to protect them. The company's not their family.
Hmm.
The company's going to lay you off in a fucking heartbeat if the stockholders and the CEO can make another extra penny. So
Oh yeah,
that's good for them. Good for them. I
yeah.
don't know what comes after that because that's kind of the basis of our economic system, but between that and AI, which I love, and
I
all of
enjoy
these
AI.
changes happening
Yeah,
to the culture, I hope we can somehow survive and thrive because of it versus becoming, a cinematic dystopian environment, which is what a lot of people are afraid of. But I think we'll be all right. I think we'll
can't we
have a
do
lot of
both?
pain. Yeah. Well, we already have the first one. It's just, it's not sci-fi based, but um, anyway, whatever. But I
No,
think
no,
it's really
I
interesting to
agree with you.
watch them.
My daughter, like she had a class where it's a leadership class, and
Mhm.
they were having them do like this personality quiz thing, this whole project where they were supposed to like, I don't know, it was some like very old fashioned like boxing in of like what personality type are you,
Oh,
and
right, right,
she and a
right.
couple other kids were like, you know what, this is bullshit, we aren't going to do this because we don't believe in this, we think this is, this goes against what we believe, and we will happily do something else like write a paper about why we disagree with this. But the teacher was really stubborn and like wrote emails to parents and was like, they're being very disrespectful and all this, and I wrote back and I was just like, you know what, like they're questioning, like this is a leadership class. Like they're questioning, they're arguing their case, they're offering to do something different. Like I support that. And I support that the way that this younger generation is going to maybe be a little bit more, like you said, like question the system a bit, question, what we've built so far. And yet at the same time, yeah, like I do worry about what that means in other terms.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
that was like,
it's
that
a
was a good
slow
moment.
process. I think,
Yeah.
unfortunately, no generation has yet been strong enough to resist the siren's call of pure capitalism that we have. And in that,
Make our
though, I
money.
think, yeah, and I think this one might hopefully be a little better than we were and a little better than the boomers were.
Because we're all
And if it,
fucking communists.
well, I don't want us to be communist either, but I think, I think even the fact that we've been fed this choice that it's one or the other is part of the problem. And I think the younger
I agree.
generation
I'm
gets that.
joking. Yeah.
Oh, I know,
Yeah.
comrade.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. And And that's the tension also with what we find online, which is always this drive to take sides or to join a team or have labels or whatever, versus like, can't we just have a little nuance? Is that so fucking hard just
No,
to
it's
have a little
impossible.
nuance?
I mean, we
Like,
see it every day online. The latest thing that both of you guys have touched on, and I don't really want to get into it, but the Sweet
Yeah.
Baby Ink thing, there's no nuance. There's this and that, and that's just the way it's going to be. And
it just
off we
makes
go
me
to the
laugh
races.
that it's called Sweet Baby Ink. I'm just like, this is funny, and it's
But
called
the
Sweet Baby
problem
Ink.
with it is though is that you really have to be able to separate the trolls and the people who are doing it for kicks from people who are genuinely engaged in a debate in a poor
But
That's really
unfortunately, a
and
tough.
it's
lot
Yeah.
of this
impossible.
stuff,
It's impossible to know
like,
who is who.
but like a lot of this stuff, when it eventually gets covered, and I think therein lies the problem. When it gets covered, the people covering it seem to latch on to I mean, this is media in general. They latch on to those trolls as the voices
A little
rather than,
sensational thing. Yeah.
yeah, it's a
Sure.
sensationalization of, there can be some valid points. And, a lot of people aren't angry for no reason. Generally, some
Yeah.
people are, and some people are completely misguided in that anger, but it started somewhere. So why don't we try to understand where it started?
Right.
You don't have to agree with it, but there's got to be some sort of validity, even if I don't agree with it at the end. I understand why you're angry, but
Yeah.
here's
But
why I don't see it that way,
it's
in a way. Yeah.
it, there. Maybe it'll be Apple's Vision Pro or something. But there's the biggest problem with people, in my opinion, from my experience with these fuckers, is that everybody is. I don't know if you could categorize it in buckets like there's 12 different types of states of consciousness anyone is in any given time of the day, right? But you can see it when you're driving, right? There's somebody who's driving to work and they are just chill, they're happy, they've got their coffee, they're listening to a podcast they love, they had sex that morning, everything's great. And then
Sounds
you've
like a
got
good
Who's
someone,
day.
that guy?
what?
Jesus.
I don't know, but then you've got the person who, it could be the same guy coming home, but
Fucking raging.
X number of things have occurred in that person's life in that time that have affected the way he is on the road. I don't mean he's got road rage, but it's like the way he drives, you can kind of see in that. And so I guess my point is that you saying, nuance and we need to have this and we need to have that. And I agree with you. And I think most people agree with you when they're in a state of mind that
Right.
says, I have the privilege and time to care about nuance. But then there are people that are like, my fucking job sucks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pissed. I'm angry. Even though I didn't lose my job to some kind of, racial quota thing that was banged into my head by some really effective radio talk show host that I was listening to driving back and forth.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
and so
Riled
now
me
I'm
up.
that guy.
Yeah.
And then they might
Yeah.
not be that guy the second they log off. So I think, I think if it's actually a problem we're interested in solving, I think we really, it's very layered. And it's, again, a lot of people do it and they justify it. I mean, the scariest I ever came was on a video game. And I'll tell you about this real quick if you're interested. Just stop me if you're not, because I don't
No,
know
go
when
ahead.
it's
Yeah.
interesting. Well, you haven't heard it yet. I'm saying if I'm in the middle of it, you're like, this is boring.
I
Just send
understand.
me-
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. But I remember we were working on Drawn to Death, and I had tried to get Eric Williams, who had gone on to direct, obviously, Ragnarok that just
Mhm.
came out. Amazing, talented guy. And I had lunch with him in Santa Monica. I was trying to see if he might want to come on as a designer. And, I told him it was a shooter and this, that, and the other. Obviously, it didn't work out, not because of personal reasons. He's great. He just didn't want to move. And he also had these other things he was working on. But he kind of just offhandedly threw out this idea to me of he didn't give it to me. We were just talking about shooters, and he says, what I'd always wanted to do in a shooter was something where, like, when you kill somebody in the game, and you get their weapon, you can either pick up what they're carrying or it'll power up your weapon. And I think we were talking about that having been in a 2D R-type or something at some point, or
Yeah. I
whatever.
was going to
But
say that sounds like vertical and horizontal.
right,
Well, we used to
but
call them shooters. Now they're shmups.
shmups, yeah. But he was applying it to a modern day competitive multiplayer shooter, and I was like, okay, that's really cool, and I forgot about it. And then, a year and a half in development of Drawn to Death, we were trying to figure out how our weapon system would work, and I quote had that idea, and I gave it to the team, and we had probably already done about 4 ideas that didn't work. And that one seemed like it was going to work. And once it was implemented, I said, oh shit, this was Eric's idea. This was not my idea. And I don't like that. But at the same time, this is the first weapon idea we've had in the game that the team is actually rallied behind. I can't tell them to take it out. And then I'm like, all right, I literally had this debate in my head, which is like, well, Eric didn't invent that. That was from shooters like R-Type.
Mhm.
And this other voice going, yeah, he didn't invent it, but he brought it to your attention as it relates to what you're working on. And if you are going to use it, because nobody was worried about being sued because you can't own a idea, but I like Eric a great deal. I have a lot of respect for him. Even if I didn't, I'm like, okay, I got to call this guy and say, hey, are you cool with this? And ultimately I didn't deal with that because we changed the system dramatically from that. But the point being is the closest I ever came to, sort of sacrificing my values was there was a voice in my head that at times was like 30-40%. I was sure I was just going to do it because I could justify it.
That's
and so
ethics in game development right there.
Yeah, that's right. But when you talk about though, the media sensationalizing things or this or that or the other, I don't think any of these people are evil. I think they're all in that same kind of place, which is I got to pay the rent. I got to get food on the table. Health insurance in America is horrific if you lose your job and so while somewhere in there's a pure human of thought going, this is right or this is wrong, there's a lot of justification going on because Americans at this point aren't given a lot of options when it comes to what happens if you are kicked off the curb by the man and by the big capitalist bosses.
Well,
so my point is, I think if we don't take those elements into account when we're talking about why people are angry, why the internet can be such a shit storm, I think it's just almost like moral soapboxing. It's like, we all know it's shit. But if we're not really going to get down in the muck and figure out what the foundation of that behavior is, then it's just, it's fun, but it's just bitching about things. So
I guess what I'll say to that is there's many levels of responsibility that go with that argument. But the only thing we control, honestly, is the person that we look at in the mirror. Like, it's the same people that get up every day and want to solve the problems online every day, but their own. You're best off to just start by making your bed. You did something, and then by fixing the problem in your own home, then you did so that. After that, you can solve what's going on in Ukraine. You know what I mean?
Sure. But
I get we can be concerned about these things. I get they can piss us off. I get they can affect our different states of consciousness and how we interact with the world. But I guess these all come with wisdom, at least I hope. There's a lot of reasons.
And they come with the privilege of having wisdom. I mean, not everybody has the time to be able to, it's not an excuse necessarily, but a lot of times one of the biggest things I hate about people is when people make assumptions about other people, but they don't take their own privilege into account. I had a guy coming at me recently, good guy. I like the guy. He's part of our Discord. And I was like, hey, I'm on Ozempic. I was talking to people like, what's Ozempic like? Blah, blah, blah. Weight loss drug, right? Diabetes drug, but weight loss is the big side effect. And, he's one of these like, get up, go to the gym, grind it out. You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to, and I appreciate that for the moment that works for him, but it's very difficult because a lot of people are like, once they lock into something that even if it's fleeting, which in his case, that mentality doesn't stick around. There's a reason, the whole world isn't great, even though we all know who Tony Robbins is. He says we'll be great if we just do these things. It's like, well, but my point though is that, it's very important, I think, to recognize that privilege of going, I know you feel that way and it's valid, but I can't really sit here and act like I have the high ground because I have the money to have the high ground, or I've had the education to have the high ground, or I've gotten lucky and I turned left instead of right and I got this job that you were late for. I mean, the fact that I'm in video games or was in video games and still sort of tangentially in games is a ridiculous, unless you believe in, we're living in a script or there's no free will or,
luck is huge. Luck is huge.
The ability of the person to make their own experience great.
Put in that position to let luck take over.
Well, yes, and I think whatever I would have ended up doing out of college, I would have become something, not because I'm so great, but because I was so desperate and hungry for some kind of success and validation. But as it relates to video games, though, that was just like I needed a job, and it was that or work at a dental office as an assistant to the secretary. I mean, it was never, it's crazy.
Yeah,
It's fucking
no.
crazy. Anyway,
No, like, yeah, I
I'm
mean,
dominating the conversation. I do
No,
this
no,
all the
you're-
time. I
It's
hear
you're
fine.
the- you're
I
our
wanted
guest.
this. I did
Yeah.
want it. I'm going to pull
Okay,
it back
well,
now.
I
to
do.
your
I do think.
audience,
Go ahead,
I
Eric. Sorry.
apologize.
Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead,
I
Eric.
wanted to talk about privilege real quick because I think there's that pithy like check your privilege bullshit that people say, but
Yeah.
I was thinking about this because one of the most dangerous and poisonous things that exists inside ourselves is self pity, and like self pity is like this horrible intoxicating drug in a way like. And so sometimes I get very depressed and I get very down and I'll think about all the things that are hard for me. And, I'm a single parent of a 16-year-old girl who's very difficult. And my job is always very uncertain and all these things. And then I have to think like, motherfucker, like you do exactly what you want to do every second of every day. Like I can write what I want to write. I can make the videos I want to make. I pay the bills. I got enough money. Like I have
and
a pretty good
daughter,
thing
as
going.
far as I know, is alive and healthy. And how many?
She's very smart and talented.
And how many fucking parents tonight? There's at least 50, if not more, in America that are getting the knock at the door from the cops. It's like
absolutely. And like we've been through some shit, absolutely. Yeah. But like we've handled it, and like a lot of that is privilege. Like coming from a middle class family, coming from educated parents, living in a good, all these things that you just don't want to take them for granted. You want to be grateful. You want to be cognizant of all those things that sort of comprise your life. And even though, yeah, it's still your life, and the things that are hard are still hard, and they can still fuck with your head. But like, yeah, like it's really, really, really crucial to just be aware that like, well, maybe that guy online who's being an asshole to you, who knows? I was thinking when you were talking earlier, I was thinking of that Michael Douglas movie, Falling Down, I think it's called, where he just like snaps, loses his shit. Like, who knows what somebody's going through? Like that person that cuts you off, that person that like flips you off or whatever. Like it's a vast array of potential horribleness that we can experience in any given day or any given life or whatever. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
And you have to be in the right mindset. You have to have the privilege of the brain chemicals at the right time to even have the perspective that you're espousing.
There's also
crazy.
Yeah. And then there's also, you can say, well, there's also a choice. Like you choose to say, you know what, today, like but that's also a privilege. You're absolutely, it's a cyclical thing because like, I can make that choice that I can go online and I can be like, I'm going to be reasonable. I'm going to be nuanced. I'm going to take this position that isn't like really extreme, but I have the privilege of doing that because of my situation. Like a lot of writers out there are in jobs where like they need to write 5 clickbait posts a day to survive. I only need to write clickbait like maybe a couple times a month to survive. You know what I mean? Like I do write clickbait. I do.
I do too. People act like they're clickbait.
You click it, man.
Is bad if it's a lie. Otherwise, it's called marketing. Where have you been?
What I'm saying. If your headline justifies the content, it's not actually clickbait. If your headline is like,
but so is every headline on the New York Times. They want to get you to buy the paper. What's the problem?
We want you to click on I want you to click on my article that I just spent a whole bunch of time writing. Like I want to put food on on my table, but I'm not going to lie to you. Like that's the difference. I 100% agree with that.
That's totally different.
I mean, I don't know what privilege is. I'm Canadian. We all live in igloos and lick maple syrup off each other. So
well, you're a bunch of commies up there.
Sounds like privilege, depending on who you're licking it off of.
Hey,
all my Canadian readers are like
bears, beavers.
There is some weird censorship up there, though.
So I'm going to rein this in. We are, Eric, there's no way we're getting out of here in 2 hours. So I'm just letting you know that right off the top.
Okay.
We'll see.
Before we get into the meat of it, I promise everyone out there, we are going to get into God of War and all the good stuff that has to do with video games. But before I started, we lost Akira Toriyama today to a sudden subdural hematoma. And it's like
that's sudden, is it? Isn't that like you get hit on the head and then it's a brain?
I guess, but no one really expounded on that. And it seems a lot of people that worked with him,
Surprise,
had
though, for
relations
sure.
with him. For sure. I mean, it's to do from something.
Yeah.
But it seemed pretty sudden. No one was talking about it beforehand. You know, you always hear prayers up if someone's sick. And I like a lot of people seem to really go crazy when certain people pass, but this one
Hmm.
was pretty big to me at
Yep.
45. Uh, Growing up, my best friend's Korean. Before I even knew what Dragon Ball was, he had the mangas. And I would read these things at 12 years old and be absolutely blown away. I mean, back
English
then we were
manga,
looking.
or was it you had to translate it, or how did you know what was happening, or
I
just
didn't.
you
It
look
was
at the
not
pictures?
translated. It
Just
wasn't
pictures. Okay.
translated. I would just look at the awesome pictures and these incredible
Yeah.
fight scenes and these really cool characters. And I loved art and I drew all the time. I still have my art
Mhm.
books. And I was just like, I want to do that. And I want to draw like that. And I want to create things. And I want to just eventually learn about this. And back then, like the aisles, we talked about this. It wasn't even anime then; it was Japanimation at Blockbuster, and now
Oh,
Akira
right, right,
Toriyama
right,
is,
right.
yeah.
Yep.
But this is a guy who affects even modern culture. Like I was thinking about this, like hip hop guys always talk about going Super Saiyan or
Yeah.
something like that. Like Pride was an old MMA thing, but there was a guy Carlos Newton, he called his style like Dragon Ball Jiu-Jitsu, and it just goes on and on and on, and from Dragon Quest to Chrono Trigger to Blue Dragon to all these incredible
To what's the
things.
word? The Sand, the new Sand. When I was watching the trailer for that new game, which I'm excited about, which is based on his manga,
Mhm.
Sand something, Sand World or whatever. And it's the weirdest thing because I like anime, but I like the style of anime and the fight scenes, but I didn't grow up with it. So it's rare that the narratives will catch me. Like I tried to watch
Yeah.
Attack on Titan. There's something about the pacing or something, but it doesn't
It's
matter.
the
The point is,
yelling at Attack on Titan. They just yell too much.
oh, I didn't have a problem
Sorry.
with that. I thought it was cool. But but
I
but
can't.
but I will say, but so it the point being though is that I didn't know what that was, but I certainly uh I started to try to watch it today because I found out when I woke up, and I was like, let me go back and watch the very first Dragon Ball, and it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. But I imagine if it hits at the right time when you're like a kid or a young teenager, it absolutely gets its hooks in you. And yeah, I know a lot of people are mourning that loss. That was I knew he was important, but I didn't realize that he was, affecting that many people in that way when he went. So,
And Chrono Trigger is a game to me I consider
oh
the
yeah,
greatest game. It's my favorite game, and I always wanted that proper sequel with his art. And now we're never going to get it. The fabled Chrono Break, if you will. Uh,
you could ask AI to do it though.
I suppose, but
Yeah.
oh man, the
They
outcry,
could.
they might burn something down at that point. But yeah, rest in peace, Akira
Yeah,
Toriyama.
Oh, AI is happening no matter how much
of
outcry there
course,
is.
of course, it's
It's just
happening.
happening.
Yes, as it
So
should.
I mean, other
Yep.
than to vibe with you, Jaffe, and talk to you about all this stuff. I mean, you are an agent of chaos. You go by that, and I love this conversation. But
Somebody called me Agent of Chaos, and I think
it's
it's stuck. I
Colin.
don't. Was it Colin?
It was Colin. That's
Okay.
sort of what he said. Yeah, and that's where I stole it from. But I love your knack for going all over the place. But
It's not a
recently,
knack, my friend. It's called ADD. But anyway, keep going.
Mhm.
um, God of War is one of my favorite franchises, and I mean, you created it along with a whole
No,
team,
with
but
a lot. Yeah,
you
whole
started
team.
it. Yeah, but I mean, you recently made that that sarcasm video about all that. That I
Yeah.
loved it, and I don't even think some people are in on the joke. But
No,
what
they're
amazes
not.
me about the greater, I started with the YouTube thing moving forward, but what amazes me about your career is as you've made yourself more available, you seem to get this. I mean, it's celebrity in general that ranged the gamut. Before we went live, I was talking to Eric about Cam Newton, who's a former
Oh, I
MVP.
know he
Um,
was in Auburn.
yes,
Yeah,
100%
I
superstar.
watched him play.
He's
Auburn's my
retired
favorite
now.
team. I'm from Alabama. I watched him play at Auburn, and I was just like, "Oh my fucking god, this guy!" Yeah, he was amazing. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. He's retired now. Goes back home and does these football camps. But it seems like celebrities who range the gamut, everyone just wants to like disrespect them and take them down. Like at a recent camp of his, some guys started to fight with him, and all he's doing is giving back.
I think
And
I saw that. I think I saw
and
that
like
online.
you're making this content, whether people like you or not, but the amount of disrespect you seem to get for this objectively incredible, and I'm not blowing smoke up your ass at all. I'm sure in this conversation we're going to disagree a lot, but you've
No,
had
we're
an
not.
incredible career. You've started these iconic franchises, And you've had extremely valid critiques, a lot of which we're going to get into, and a lot of which, as a longtime fan, I agree with. Maybe
Right.
in different ways. We'll go back and forth.
I'm a
But
pretty
people
big
don't even
deal.
want to hear them because they just, oh, you're just jealous of this or
Oh,
or
that's the
or
one.
that.
That's the one that, yeah, that one
And it's
bugs me
absurd.
is,
It's absolutely absurd because like again, the nuance comes into play. You can't
yeah,
have even a valid take. It's got to be
but
jealousy.
let's
But
take it from their perspective for a moment. Let's analyze what do you think that's about? Because practically I can't express anymore. You know if someone's practically out there going, yes, but you're upset, you're salty because Sony doesn't want to work with you anymore, you can't get a job in games anymore, you're old, you're irrelevant, that's kind of the things they try to hit me with, right? And I'm kind of like, but I first off, I do work on games still. I'm a consultant, I get paid for that,
I figured that.
and I've had a number of opportunities to direct games again, and I've turned them all down. Not because I'm some, I have the privilege, the financial privilege to say I'd rather be doing what I'm doing right now. So if you're interested in the truth, that one doesn't stick. And I don't go out there and troll. Like you said, I give proper, whether they agree or not, logic behind these decisions. Or these statements. And so at that point, you have to go, what is it? Is it that they really love, like if we take God of War, the new God of War, I mean, I loved 2018's God of War. It was one of my top games of that year. It was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it just that they have such a connection to it? Like maybe we're talking about like Dragon Ball. Maybe it's so personal to them that they just don't want to hear any negative aspect about it. I don't know where it comes from, but you're absolutely right. There's a uh, I don't mind it. Like it doesn't. I don't feel like
You're a
just
big boy. You can handle it.
I just like it's just like really, man. I don't. I'm just being honest. But you know what I realized recently, though, this was amazing to me. Uh, I recognized finally because when I started streaming, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take the rose tinted glasses off a lot of these gamers' eyes. I'm going to tell them how it really is. I'm going to show them the good and the bad. Blah blah blah. That was like I thought it would be fun because I thought that was something I would appreciate. And I have found, and I don't mean this like I'm saying it like a negative thing, a lot of people don't want that. A lot of people want to
No,
believe, not that video games are being painted as a glamorous gig, because they're not, but a lot of people want to believe the uh, the PR angle on this stuff, not because they're idiots, but because I think in their lives it's kind of fun. Like I look at art, I could never draw art. And I look at art and I go, oh, that must be so much fun to draw Spider-Man swinging over New York or whatever. And I'm sure it is for people who can draw well, but I'm sure there was a lot of time learning to become that was hard and frustrating and stressful. I don't want to know about that. I just want to look at the art and go, ooh,
fair
art
enough.
is magic. And so I'm starting to come around to the fact that maybe part of the animosity some people have towards me is they don't want the rose tinted glasses pulled off. They're like, no, we're good. We're good eating the steak in the
Well, I
maker.
got, and I think you're exactly right. And I'll give you a sports analogy recently before I pull it back and frame this conversation. JJ Redick is a retired NBA player, and I despise the hot take sports shows. They're not for me.
Okay.
But anyway, he got into the problem with this, and this is an analogy to what you're talking about. He's like, I can make a video breaking down whoever player, Zion Williamson, for instance, and his last 150 possessions when he's facing perimeter defense and such setup, and that'll garner 30,000 views. But I get on this fucking show and I talk about former coach and the problems I have with him and how he's always passing the buck, and I get 30 million views in 2 days. He goes, now, do you want to learn about the game or you just want to learn about the bullshit? And I'm convinced most people just want to learn the bullshit and have the you know what I mean? Either be
Well,
distracted
that's
with the drama in this case or the pretty picture of the game and not how
Yeah,
the
there's a
cake gets
wisdom
made
to
behind
that.
it.
Oh, there's a wisdom to that awareness that it's taken me a lot longer than someone with my experience should admit to come around to. And I don't know what I want to do with that wisdom because I don't want to become I see a lot of these YouTube
You're not
shows that
going to
do
be
a
able to
lot.
shut it off at 52.
Well, I don't mind being honest and stuff. It's just that what I don't want to do though is a lot of these YouTube shows that are pure console war stuff. Like I know they do well, But my God, I think about, I really love this work. And I'd love to make a career out of it. I want to do this, like Art Bell till the day I drop dead. And so I'm not going to be able to be 65 bitching about the new Xbox. And, I don't want to do
Right.
that. I want to have something to say, and I want to learn how to say it well. And I want to connect with the audience. And,
Well, like, I think this comes back to the idea, like, of what is criticism. Like I that's what I do. I'm a critic, and when there, I have a whole list of like the responses I get for criticism. Now, I don't get the, oh, you're just old and bitter because you're not doing it anymore. I get the, why don't you do it if why don't you go make a video game if you, as though you can't have an opinion about a video game unless you can go make a $200 million video game. Well, I don't have $200 million to go make the video game, but maybe as a critic, I can still talk about it. And there's a whole list of other things that I.
But what's funny about that
get,
argument, though, is, but they don't seem to have a problem having done nothing, but they can talk about it.
Right? They have an opinion.
People love it. Like what? I mean, just to bring it back,
go ahead.
What makes their love more valuable than the critique?
Why isn't critique love?
That's thing. Right. Your critique is love. You care.
Yeah, I say that sycophants are much, much less useful than critics. I think it's much, much like I nowadays I criticize TV shows a lot more. Like I do a lot more criticism for TV than video games. Like I've just moved in that direction. I write, about what's wrong with a lot of TV shows. Now I think that's more valuable than the thing I'm often told, which is, why don't you just not watch it? Well, if everyone just says, why don't you just not watch it? Well, then the ratings drop and the show gets canceled.
True.
Okay. But if you listen to the critics who might have some good ideas, well, maybe the show gets better. More people watch it. But somehow you're the enemy when you have anything negative. And I don't even see it as necessarily negative, but when you have observations about a game, a movie, part of the problem also is that a lot of, we could get all into like access media and how that works in various industries, and like how much of it is just, just fluffing up the corporate line, or just spewing out PR shit. If you want to be a real critic, you have to like not be, like, I'm pretty sure that after my criticisms of the last season of True Detective, that I'm blacklisted by HBO. I am 100% sure that I'm blacklisted by PlayStation.
Like I saw a lot of your tweets. You were not a fan of that show, correct?
I wasn't either.
But you know what? Like a lot of people are not. Like it's scary to go and speak your mind, because you will get blacklisted. Like I haven't gotten a Sony. I haven't gotten a Sony review code since before Last of Us 2. And I've never been told why. I don't know what I did to piss them off, but Sony has, and I don't give a fuck. Yeah, I wrote my Last of Us Part 2 review 4 months after release. One of my best reviews I've ever written, I think. It got plenty of traffic, and I don't care about, that's another thing about the whole video game journalism industry, the whole thing. Like everyone's trying to push out these reviews. They get a review code 4 days ahead of time and play 70 hours of a game in 4 days and make $150. It's like slave wages, man. And like, that's what we're supposed to base our opinion off of. I gave it up years ago. If I'm going to review a game, it might take me, I don't know, it might take me 4 months. But I'm going to play
I was talking to Victor Lucas the other day on this show, on this channel.
Yeah, I want to listen. I haven't got a chance to listen to that yet.
Well, we were talking about
being a Canadian. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but being a Canadian, Victor Lewis was big here. Like, I mean, he is Canadian, right? So,
who was big there?
Victor Lucas.
Who the fuck is Victor Lewis?
Lucas.
Oh, he was big. I was just fucking with
you.
Like,
he
did. He was real big. You couldn't even remember his name.
Sorry, I said it wrong. But he ran a video game show that on a Canadian network here.
Yeah, of course. Electric Playground.
That's right. Yeah.
Tommy and a bunch of Zoe Flower. No, it was really cool to have him on, because, I was in the business while he was covering it. So I didn't really get to experience his work as a fan, but all the people who were calling in or writing in or whatever during the show were, him and his work and his team have impacted a lot of people. So you're not alone in that kind of, real warm feelings for the guy. But I was asking him as it relates to reviews though, because he reviews a lot for his channel and he plays a lot. I said, how do you fucking have the time to finish this shit? He goes, oh, I don't finish a lot of things. He says, I play enough to have an opinion. And I let the audience know that that's how much I've played. So it's, they're not misconstruing anything or they're, and I agree. I mean, but I think you have a great point. It's like, you're going to take the opinion of someone who played it in 4 hours or 4 days just to get the review up. It's like, they haven't sat with it. They haven't really, but I mean, it's, that's the other problem though, is I think we need media literacy in schools. I've said this forever and I'm not the only one to say it, of course, but the idea that a bunch of younger people will look at a review score, or older people, sadly, and act as if like it's come down from, Mount Sinai with Moses and the 10 Commandments. It's like, it's a fucking review score, dude. I had the guy who review bombed Drawn to Death at IGN, gave it a 4. He left the business and he and I got into a Twitter pissing match a couple of years ago. And he was just like, oh, I don't care. Yeah, I totally fucked that game. I don't care. Yeah, it's funny. Right. I mean, that's, I'm not saying they're all that way and they're all that flippant. What I'm saying is to imbue these people with that kind of power just because they happen to work for fucking IGN.
And look at IGN though. Like I would also say that a lot of these outlets are trying to create so much content that they are putting people in charge of reviews of games that they don't really understand. Like, okay, so like I'm a big Call of Duty player. It's what I play with my friends. I know that game pretty damn well. And Modern Warfare 3 came out and it got the worst reviews of any Call of Duty ever. Right. And it's actually a really good game. And I was reading reviews, including IGN's review, that were full of factual errors and a very obvious lack of just basic knowledge of the franchise and how it works. Really simple, basic things like what slide canceling is or what, these like basic stuff. And they are putting out at some of the biggest gaming publications in the world review scores for something that they clearly don't understand. And it sounds like they're parroting people bitching on Reddit to me. And like, that's not criticism.
But it doesn't, but in the context of what matters, it doesn't, right? Because the game still sells bucket loads.
Sure, that game does, but smaller games might not.
But yeah, but the people who care about those to begin with are finding their people who speak for them on the internet. I mean, so absolutely. So like for me, I gave up. I for the longest time, I've only recently started to kind of make peace with it. I gave up trying to convince people who watch my shit to care about indie games or interesting. Like to me, they are the most. It doesn't mean they're good, although a lot of them are brilliant, but they are where a lot of the juice is happening right now.
Yes, 1,000%. Like right. Everyone talks about, like I hear these people go online, games these days, there's nothing to play. Everything's the same. I'm like,
there's too much to play.
Have you not been paying attention really since I mean, it was happening in the PS 360 era, but really caught steam in abundance in the PS4 and X1 era. But that's where the innovation, that's where the risk taking is happening. If that's what you want, if you want something new, and very rarely we do get it out of like a Shadow of Mordor with the Nemesis system or something to that effect. But I mean, with the budgets, and that's another topic all in and of itself, it's almost impossible to take these risks. They're focus tested to hell. They are consultancies, agents to hell. And I mean, the teams are so big that it's such like, how do you turn the rudder on something like that? You just can't. And it drives me fucking insane as someone like we've been playing games for so long that it's like, you can't like, when someone says that, like, what do you play? And it's the same games all the time. And that's fine. But don't complain about it when you can't take those horse blinders off to even try something.
Today, everyone's pissed because Fortnite's down.
And today, it is easier and cheaper than ever to jump into new experiences. It's never been easier and cheaper.
It's easier and cheaper to make them. I mean, that's the other part. It's
when
ridiculous.
We grew up,
but that said, though, I had to come to a come to Jesus moment where I was like, what they say is irrelevant, right? Because how many people say, I want something new, but then something new comes out and nobody buys it. And that's fine. But so a lot of that is lip service when they say that, because the people who really say that will seek it out, and it is out there. But my point, though, for me is that I had to kind of just go, I'm going to cover on my stuff indie games when they're interesting to me. And I know they're not going to get a lot of views, but it, whatever, because I don't, that's what I'm liking right now. And so my point to you, Eric, though, is that there are, because of the internet, there are people that can find the Call of Duty guy that really gets it, and they listen to him or her, their YouTube channel or their Substack or whatever. And I think that's how it should be. That's wonderful. And I think if you actually, games are expensive. Guys, listen, games are expensive. We know that. But this is, again, people come at me all the time for things like Game Pass and PS Plus and subscription services. I think part of it's this just fanboy bullshit. But there's a game that just came out, and I haven't played it yet, on Game Pass called something Genesis or some. It's some kind of. I'll read you the descriptor, but here's what I love about it, and it's the perfect example of why this is such a wonderful thing for the medium. The descriptor is, it is a game called they put Return to Grace is what it's called, right? And it says a daring space archaeologist has just unearthed the ancient resting place of a long-lost AI god known as Grace. Adventure with various fractured AI personalities as you uncover the great mystery of why she was shut down all those years ago. Okay. Now, as a guy who loves sci-fi and a guy who loves, adventure stories, I'm like, if I saw that on the back of a book in an airport, I go, that sounds fucking cool. What is this? Right. I never heard of this fucking game in my goddamn life ever, but it's on Game Pass and it cost me nothing to try it other than my monthly subscription. And I'm suddenly going to try this fucking thing.
Yeah.
I understand for the longest time why video games at 60 and now $70 really people need to feel comfortable in that, because it's not like a movie where you're just like, fuck it, let's go see. Oh, that was fucking great, And I love that about video games, that we are getting there, because I think it does take away that power from the critic, which is not to say the critics are bad, but it's to say that when you put $60 in front of somebody as a price, you don't feel good about discovering the weird stuff or going off the beaten path. $70, a lot of money. So I think that's one of the reasons I champion these subservices so much, and people, they get upset and stuff. And then the other day I saw Phil Spencer from Microsoft tweeting about this game going, "Oh, I just finished it. It's awesome." And I'm like, that's the shit. That's the fucking shit. That's how it should be.
I think that
discovered that are great, that we didn't be like, oh, there's no hype about David Cronenberg's The Fly when I was a kid in high school. It just came out. We saw it. We're like, that's fucking awesome. That's me.
Anyway, I think there's also a difference between like a review. Like I try to separate like the idea between like reviewer and critic. Like, are we writing a review to say you should spend your money or not spend your money on this game? Or are we writing criticism for ourselves? Like to just talk about and think about something a little bit more deeply,
I think it depends on who you're reading, right?
Exactly. And I think that like I've moved more towards like even though I want to let people know this is bad or good, like I don't want to have to do it in this time frame where that matters so much. I'd rather write like from a personal place where it's where it's talking about like, this is, even if it is on Game Pass and it won't cost you anything, like, is it worth your time? But is it like, did it make me feel something? Did I enjoy it? Was it something worthwhile for me? And then you can make up your own mind,
The other thing, I'm sorry, you got to rein it in if you want, because I'll just
I'm going to rein it in right now, because we had a really big review.
I got to answer
that.
Okay,
I will. Go ahead.
Okay. So Victor Lucas, hang on, baby, give me 5 minutes. No, Calvin did though. So Victor Lucas was talking about a college in Canada that they had worked with to give all of the old archives of Electric Playground, all the B-roll, the interviews, the cuts that never made it to TV, the official episodes, for a critical studies program at some Canadian university. I forget the name. And I was like, that is the important shit, is the critical studies aspect of this medium, because so many people, and I think going to college to learn to make video games is probably a waste of time, but I appreciate it, because now it's so much, it doesn't matter. It's a different conversation. But looking at games with the critical eye, you talk about that online, and I'm stunned how many people come at you like you're a fucking idiot. Like I was playing Fortnite, the mode, what do they call it? The hide and seek mode, where you're like, you become an inanimate object and one player's going around trying to figure out and kill them. And it was in a shopping mall, and I became a box hiding behind a counter. and all the lights were off in that store. And I heard shooting all over. And I was on Discord with my membership, and heard them going, oh fuck, and running and screaming and all that. And I just made an offhanded comment. I said, this is so interesting to me. I said, this must be like, to some extent, like a school shooting or a mass shooting. It's like, you're in, it's a simulation of that. And I wasn't like saying it's fun. I was saying, luckily, this is probably the closest I'll ever get to that kind of situation. And I talked to a couple other people. They said, yeah, I felt that way. But you would have thought, it's like, you're a fucking idiot. You think this is a school shooting game? I'm like, motherfucker, it's called analysis and critique and looking just a hint below the fucking surface level of what you're playing. I can't blame them because they were educated with the banana and inner tube. I don't know where they got their education from, but when I fucking came up, we read books and we watched movies and we analyzed them. And what does it mean? And it doesn't matter if the author intended for it or not.
Right.
It's in there for you in the exercise, the intellectual exercise of self-reflection of how a piece of art makes you feel is a valuable pursuit. And I love that you're writing your stuff that's more from that angle. And I love that colleges are starting to understand that, because a lot of these fucking vocal online gamers are like, they don't want to hear it.
No.
They do not want to hear it.
And well, we can get into a whole discussion of authorial intent and all of that, which is a fascinating subject.
I'm only going to read it in because we did have we had Lord Cognito. I know you spoke with him before, Jaffe.
Oh yeah.
We had a really in-depth discussion on our last podcast about reviewing. And honestly, Eric and I are planning like an episode about critiquing games and how we talk about games.
You don't have to explain your motivations to me.
No, I'm just saying. But an hour and 10
God of War.
minutes.
You want to talk God of War? Let's talk God of War.
I absolutely want to talk fucking God of War.
Just talk God of War.
Specifically, a lot of people dogpiled you. I'm just going to frame it with your initial comments before we move forward about how Kratos has evolved or even devolved as a character really into Ragnarok, because you didn't have too many problems with the 2018. And my problem was, like, you're a well-read individual. You went to school for literature and all this stuff. They act like you don't know what character development is and things.
Oh, that was my favorite.
But my biggest problem is not problem, I guess. I just haven't really seen anyone talk to you in depth about this. And it seems pretty fucking important in terms of the greater God of War narrative about like and dislike, at least to me, because as a longtime fan who's played and loved all these games, I actually had a big problem with Ragnarok too. Maybe not exactly in the way that you did, but I wrote something a long time ago on IGN when this whole hubbub about how Kratos was a bad character. Colin and Greg talked about this a lot on Beyond back in the day, but this seemed to be like all these topics. They seem to hum.
You mean the original group of Kratos, the original game?
Yes, back then. I'm talking about, and this started around God of War 3, right before God of War 3, I suppose. People were talking about Kratos as a bad character, this and this. I can't stand him. And I wrote a piece on IGN. Does liking Kratos matter? Because so many of our characters, I run into a lot of this, but Mario doesn't change. Dante from Devil May Cry never changed until DMC wasn't out yet. But
right.
And we seem to not give a fuck. They're these cliches that, and ultimately they're conduits to make these games work. And that's what Kratos was. He was a conduit to rage and anger and destruction. And yes, there was some background to it, but in that thing, and with that mindset, the character worked perfectly for the games. And each game started to take it a little bit further. I suppose by the end, you could say the setting wore out its welcome. But I mean, and I welcomed the change to the newer games. I was super pumped to go to the Norse because your initial ending, or the secret ending in God of War 1, teased a lot of this stuff with Kratos' brother and the other pantheons. And I think you had to finish all the challenges to get that, if I remember correctly. I don't really remember. But by the time we got to the Norse thing, and 2018, I was super pumped for. I loved it. And I guess I'll start it with this. My critiques, aside from character, which wasn't a big of an issue until I got to Ragnarok. And it's funny because I tagged in the document, you did a director's panel right after God of War 3, and I think it was prior to God of War Ascension coming out,
It
where
was
all
prior to
you
one of
guys.
the PSP ones, or it was one of the Ready at Dawn games was about to come out, I believe. Actually,
Okay.
is what. But yeah, and you can find it
Um,
online still if you want to
yes,
watch
and
it.
I'll probably link to it or whatever. And you,
Okay,
Corey, Stig, and the Ready at Dawn gentlemen were there, and a lot of the I flagged a specific thing that Corey said and how they wanted to keep Kratos the way he was because it added a sense of scale. And one of my initial issues when or worries for 2018 is, and it to me it became truth. I think in the move to the new games, that sense of scale was lost.
sure.
The shifting setting, like God of War, all the way 1 through 3, and the PSG games, but I'll just reference the mainline games here. The settings would mold. Eventually, you would end up back at this core place or something to that effect. That was always incredible. But I'll just give it, in God of War 3, there's a setting you come to with one of the Titans in the background. Helios is firing from the chariot with these fireballs. There is nothing in the new games that come close to the scale of that. And it got given up. The scale was
There's a
at the
few. There's
cost
a
of what it
few
became.
things, right? You could argue the
I'm just
water
going to start
serpent.
there.
And
Yeah.
then there's at the end where they go to spread the ashes. There was this great shot of this mountain that kind of looked like a skeleton. I don't know if it was a skeleton. Maybe I'm remembering it wrong. That was sort of like marbled into the rock. I don't know if it was carved in or, but you're right. For the most part, though, there was I noticed that as well. I noticed that. I noticed the lack of visual variety in the environments. Um, with God of War 1, it was a conscious choice to say Athens, well, the Aegean Sea, and then Athens looks a certain way. There's a certain color palette. Then we have the desert. Then we have Pandora. Then we have Hades. And then we come back to Athens. But it felt like you were going somewhere. I think with the new trilogy or the new duology, whatever the fuck you want to call it, it's just a lot of fucking snow. I'm not saying there aren't any other places, but it just feels like it's this constant. You're playing the game on Hoth, and I like going places as a sense of adventure, and I didn't get that in either of them. But I mean, that's a
Isn't
choice,
it?
and it's
Isn't it
fine.
also kind of a camera angle issue?
Well,
I
and that's
because revisiting the old God of War, I think on PlayStation Plus or whatever, I think I managed to, because I own the old one somewhere on discs, but
Yeah,
just like scenes where it scales out, the camera scales out so far that you get that like sense of like you're looking down on this huge epic scene. Whereas like
yeah.
the new God of Wars are the over the shoulder third person, which has just become kind of a Sony staple in recent
Yeah.
years. It's just like Last of Us,
Well, you talk about
Uncharted, and that's just a very like mechanical thing, just camera angle, but it does change how you experience
the only thing I just
landscapes.
want to jump in really quick about. I felt scale is it's one of the most important. It's what made God of War what it was, other than
yeah.
the violence. I should say, but the scale was unprecedented for the games. And when the 2018 trailers hit, everyone was really excited. But I think a long time fans did have that trepidation, like, are we going to be able to get what we used to get from these games with this pulled in camera? And
It's
a
not
lot of people
about the
shot it
pulled in.
down with
It's
that hype.
not about the pulled in camera, though. It is, and it's not. You're addressing the practical reason, but you're not addressing the artistic reason, right? Practically, yes. If the camera's really close, no matter what you're looking at, is going to be limited by the fact that you can't pull back and reveal anything. That's a very practical observation. But fundamentally, whether or not, let's just go by what Corey has said. And I have never questioned Corey on this. I just believed it. I mean, it's possible he made up a bunch of shit about, I didn't want the camera to ever cut because they didn't have the time to build things at that fidelity that we did back in the day at that scale. Or what, let's assume though it's the real story that Corey's like, no, I think there's an emotional connection with the camera not cutting, blah, blah, blah. And in that you sacrifice the scale. Now, you would have to be really hook, line, and sinker into that don't cut the camera to sacrifice that. And I can tell you that I was disappointed in the press, even though I love 2018. There was nothing about that camera not cutting that made a bit of fucking difference.
I agree.
It did not matter. And the press was like, oh
Like it was
my
this big
God,
deal.
I have a penis, but I'm moist. How is this happening? I mean, that's what it was like. And it was like, okay, what value is coming from it? I understand in a movie, a really long shot is it's gimmicky and it's impressive. You know, it's like, wow, they didn't cut the whole shot. And I also understand that maybe for a segment, if you don't cut the camera, you can, uh, manipulate the audience's emotions in a great way. But there's a lot of video games that don't cut. You know what didn't cut? Doom. I mean, I know we had load screens, but it's like,
Wait, was the press was the press impressed by the fact that the
They-
camera
It was
didn't
a
cut?
buzz statement. It was a buzz
Yeah.
statement.
right. And you couldn't.
I don't pay attention to anything, and that's part of my problem. Is I'm so
Well, that's probably a
insular.
good thing.
I didn't realize people thought that was cool. It just seemed kind of like a lot of other games to me.
It seemed like a
When
lot
you
of
actually
work.
when you look at the old God of War, I think that's what struck me when I'm talking about camera angles. It struck me that no games are really doing that now. Like there's not that many games where you like walk into a room and you're at one angle, and then you walk
Right.
into that room and now the camera is over here. And you see it from a different angle, and then you cut, and that's not something you see that
I was
often.
playing Final Fantasy Reborn because I haven't played that, so I'm not going to play Rebirth yet. So this is the first one that came out in 2020.
Remake.
Can we keep track of the names of these games? No,
Yeah,
we
remake
cannot.
then rebirth.
I can't.
Square is the worst.
Third is abortion.
But I will say though that it was real joy when I was walking around that environment when Cloud separates from the resistance at first, in the first like chapter 3. And there were a couple camera shots like that where Cloud kind of goes up on these balconies and suddenly it just kind of cuts. And I felt like I was playing Parasite Eve again or something. And I was like, that's, I've missed that. I really, really like that.
Old school.
So no, I mean, I don't think that's why I didn't connect as much with Ragnarok, but I certainly would agree with you that there was kind of what it was? Here's what I'll tell you. God of War, as much as I was desperate for, and I would say Corey probably felt this way on 2 and Stig probably felt this way on 3, but I certainly did. I was desperate for the accolades and the success and the money that would have come if we would have made a hit and all that stuff. But I still wanted to make whatever the fuck we wanted to make. This one, and I'm not saying this was not what Corey wanted to make. I believe it very much was. But there was a sense of an overprotection of the need to present this as it has grown up. And I get it in 2018's God of War, because that was such a part of the story. And that was so, it both at a meta level and a moment to moment level, that was so clever of Corey and so important to what that game was. But I think one of the reasons Ragnarok doesn't hit with me is because that rabbit was already pulled out of the hat. And so now you're actually left without that's clever, that's cool. And it's just the world they made. And Kratos, as Kratos now, is kind of a boring guy to me. I know a lot of people.
I get it. The father and son thing was really compelling.
I got to get this call real quick. I'm not going to go anywhere.
Do your thing. Do your thing.
No, go ahead, Eric.
Well, I was going to say that for me in 2018's game, much more than. I love Viking stuff, and I love a lot of games that are third person over the shoulder. I'm a Dark Souls fan and all that. But I liked the relationship between father and son, and I thought that the actors did a wonderful job. And
the whole thing is always produced.
It was just as a production,
like production and visuals,
nothing like the old games, but it really connected on a different level that I really appreciated. I guess maybe it didn't. Maybe sometimes I question whether it needed to be like the same characters from the old games or whatever, but it was effective. I couldn't really get into the newest one, Ragnarok. So I can't really comment on that a lot. It just didn't connect with me. Maybe that's me. I don't know. It felt.
No, I think
I just want to say, like, if anyone questions, I'm a fan. I got Mjolnir right here. And one of my biggest fucking problems about Ragnarok is we never got to use it. And I listened to Eric's rationale about that, and it's funny because
what was the rationale?
They just thought it was redundant in terms of the Leviathan axe, which I thought was a bit of a cop out. I think there's ways to make any when you think about Norse, mythology, what do you think about? You think about Thor, you
Yeah,
think
you know,
about
Thor.
Odin, you think about the hammer, and you think about Ragnarok. And, you know, and everyone from all these weapons that we've got to use, from Hercules's, you know, whatever you call them, and all these Hades claws, and you want to use these iconic godlike weapons. And the fact that we never got to use this, and the fact that I see so many fans defend that we never got to use this, drives me
Mm.
absolutely insane, because that used to be a staple about God of War. I mean, again, it wasn't the main thrust, but all these smaller things added up to my dislike of Ragnarok. And I wrote a critique about it that I took a lot of heat for. You know what? Fuck it. I'm going to keep this thing. And it was that. But I think the change in director, I know you really like Eric. I have no problem with him. I don't
Oh,
know him.
Eric's a fucking genius. If it wasn't for Eric, I mean, what Eric has brought to the God of War series, not to mention the other games, him and Eric Williams, or sorry, Eric and Derek came together with Corey from Backyard Wrestling, and Eric and Derek are not connected at the hip. And Eric worked on Spider-Man and a bunch of other things, but it's just easy to call them like Eric and Derek. But
Yeah.
Eric directed Ragnarok. But
Yes.
between Eric and Derek and Corey, and obviously a lot of other people, but those three really, their understanding and their contributions to Western combat from 2005 to today is insanely pervasive. And I hope that eventually people recognize that and they get their props for that. But as it relates to Eric, he's a great dude and he's a wonderful creative and all that. But I do not think Ragnarok was a very good. It was well made. It was beautifully made.
Yes.
The combat was really good.
I have no issues with the combat.
I did not have a fun time in that game, and I did not have an engaging time in that game.
I kind of have an issue with the combat in the new God of War games, actually, in both of them.
More capacity.
I feel like they're very grindy combat. I just like when I went back and played, because I played 2018 and I was like, this is fun. I dig it. It's cool. Like the story. Then I went back and played some of the older games, not a lot. Like I played them, but I went back and just played them again for a little bit. And I was like, I feel like a God of War right now. Like I'm tearing through everybody so fast. And I felt like everyone was like a bullet sponge in the newer games.
Can I add?
I don't think it was bad combat. It wasn't what I was like, would think of for God of War. Like it's not bad.
It's just
that's fine, but
I talked to you a lot about this, even in 2018. That was one of my big complaints about the game. I didn't feel overly powerful, at least until the end. And part of that was enemies on screen. The old games allowed, because of the scale, more enemies on screen. I was able to just tear through fodder while a centaur was in the background that I had to take down. Maybe it's just token, but it made me feel more powerful ripping a couple guys apart.
Yeah.
And before I ripped the intestines out of the centaur. Whereas in this game, there was a conscious effort to tone the violence down in 2018's game. Eric, we lost your video there, but I'm sure you'll be right
hold
back.
on a second. I'm working on it.
I mean, I know the violence was toned down. But you're saying it was conscious? I wasn't aware.
I mean, that was only I cannot say that. That's a guess. It just seemed to be, especially because there was a lot of hubbub after Ascension's game.
Oh, yeah.
That the violence became extremely gratuitous in a way. And all of that was gone for the most part in 2018, other than a few.
Yeah, I don't think it was complaining for a brief moment because but there's nothing wrong with it. I just don't like it. There's something about Sony's, not all of them. Tsushima did not suffer from this, and I loved Last of Us Part 2. Again, I loved Corey's take, but they all, or a lot of them, seem to be very motivated to drink from this well of, we want to be prestige TV. We don't, fun is like, if you have fun along the way, that's okay. Like if we let, if we can somehow justify Thor's hammer, that's okay. But we're not going to put it in there just because you want it in there. We're going to put it in there. I literally had somebody, I will not say who they are, but trust me, they are in the know beyond almost anyone else that could be in the know. And I was having lunch with them, and we were talking about Ragnarok, and I said, there's this segment a lot of gamers are complaining about where I guess it's like you ride a yak. I didn't even get that far, and you're like on a moose, or it just goes on and on and on. You know what I'm talking about?
It's the worst part of the game, and that's another. Right. Pacing is an issue of Ragnarok, but we can get to that.
I think it sounds like a blast, personally.
Yeah. So I says to this person, why didn't because they were around at the time? I said, why didn't they just cut that or shorten it, or even if they had done a lot of work on it, just do a dissolve between this, and they said to me, well, now story is everything at Santa Monica. That drives everything. And so for whatever reason, and I wanted to point out, it's like, well, part of story is pacing, but that aside, but for whatever reason, having that journey for the character, which wasn't even the star character, you're playing Atreus,
and that's why they kept it in.
And I'm kind of like, having that journey was so important that they're willing to make a boring slog portion of their game for a lot of people. Now, that may not be what they say. They may say, what are you talking about? This thing focus tested through the roof. Eric loved it. Corey gave it his blessing. He loved it. The team loved it. Could be. And they just misjudged a lot of gamers, which is not hard to do. But when they said to me, this person said to me, it's like story rules everything now. I was just like, that's so stupid.
Well, and also it doesn't in
the movies where story rules everything. They edit their fucking movies to make them interesting. It's not like just because you had an idea, it's got to go in the game.
But what does story even mean in a video game? Like I'm a huge Dark Souls fan. I love all the Souls games. 99% of the storytelling in a Souls game is interactive and visual, right? Most of the story is told through environmental stuff. Yeah. It's what you see when you walk into the room. It's the it's not dialogue. It's not story in the traditional sense of like I'm watching a movie. It's story in a video game sense, and there is story in a when you walk into an arena and you fight 30 goblins. That's story in its own way. Like look at Baldur's Gate 3. Like
it's everything is a story. Yeah.
I mean, that's story. That counts as story. This idea from Sony right now, which I totally have seen them do. They want God of War to be The Last of Us. They want all these games to be the same in that they're telling this HBO story, right? And that's not what I think that's putting too many eggs in one basket, for one thing. Like not every game has to be an over-the-shoulder, third-person, story-driven.
To their credit, they are learning that. I don't, Helldivers 2, I think I'd be stunned if that doesn't open up a lot of eyes there. That it's like, we can be real successful without the heavy narrative, even though there is narrative, and we can also be really successful without spending all this money if the core of the medium is being respected, which is interactivity. I'm going to get my child a cigarette because they're going to. Who has to pee? My dog has to pee. Okay, so you guys talk. I'll be back in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
All right. I'll be right back.
Cool.
Let me get me off the screen, and then you guys keep going, and people can. So people are watching you right now. So you guys,
hi everyone. I'm Jason. Right. Pleasure to meet you. And now we're hijacking Jaffe's speed. Fuck that guy talking a lot.
Okay.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Giving his children cigarettes, giving his dog cigarettes. Yeah. Oh my God.
Everyone's smoking.
Everyone's smoking.
Birds' heads are falling off. No, but I'm glad the plan was to really dig into the God of War thing here, and
I think we've done that pretty well. I kind
of haven't gotten started on it, to be honest.
I know, but you're much deeper into God of War than me. So for me, I'm like, yeah, that was great. We got it.
But I'm glad you brought up that was one of the things I forgot is how less powerful I felt as Kratos in the games. I forgot that was one of my critiques initially, and it is true. You go from God of War 3, just a fucking wrecking machine, and even in Ascension, same thing. A game maligned much too heavily.
I liked Ascension,
and I did too, but it was only maligned because the setting had overstayed its welcome. That's all I'm convinced. There's some things visually and gameplay wise that. I mean, I've listened to guys who know technical breakdowns far more than me, but they'll expound up and down that Ascension was the best looking game of the PS360 era in terms of what they were doing with the Hecatoncheires fight at the beginning and then the end.
Ascension
End
looks
boss fight,
fantastic.
whatever.
That's when I actually loaded up. I think on my actually, I think I hooked up my PS3 and I had the disc and I loaded it up and I was like, damn, that looks good. That and like
Mhm.
Demon Souls. I played that like getting my PS3 out and I'm like, damn, God of War Ascension, Demon Souls, these games look good. Even like for how old they are,
Yeah.
it's amazing. It's
Oh, God of War
amazing.
Ascension
Listen,
is still
PS3, it's
well,
amazing what they
3
did.
and Ascensions are still
Yeah,
showcases. But
yeah.
getting back to the Ragnarok discussion, and we'll get to your takes on the character, which was the main thrust that a lot of people were on you for, and I don't think anyone was actually listening. Um, but I think the change in director hurt Ragnarok, and not because of the skill of the developer, the know-how, but they seem to forget things and threads that were in 2018 and they didn't pick up. And that is initially because this was supposed to be a trilogy forced into a duology. And my biggest complaint about the game was the finale was a, a rushed mess. The namesake of the game is Ragnarok. It's like this golden path rush mission that we don't even see at the beginning. We fight the two end bosses in front of the same cabin. The length of this finale that this entire thing is built to is the length of a side quest about Freya's ex-husband and their former marriage with her and Odin. It wasn't given what it needed to be. Like when I think of Ragnarok, it's this end cataclysm war of the old gods making way for the new. And what we got certainly wasn't that. I'm jumping and covering things all over the place, I know. And the pacing was the issue too. I mean, but these were all massive issues I had with the game.
I didn't play that much of it, so I don't know.
Did
Just
you finish it, Jaffe?
I
No.
got
Where did you bow out?
I got to the part where the jellyfish comes out of the sand or the
Okay.
snow
I
or
mean, you could play them in
something.
different orders. Uh,
I don't know. I mean, I did one standalone mission where Atreus goes with the little blue dude,
Brock.
Bindi or what's his name? Brock. And they go into like a cave and he's down there shouting at him from down below and he's doing all this
That's
shit. And then
exactly
they
his
go,
voice too.
that
That's
was a good
yeah,
perfect.
voice.
and,
Yeah.
and they go back to camp and then you get Kratos again. And, I mean, it just wasn't, it was not for me. If it hadn't been called God of War, like I'll give you an example. I'm playing Banishers right now. That is blowing my mind. It's much more janky than God of War ever was. The combat's not as good, but I like the subject, I like the story, I like the characters. If God of War Ragnarok was a standalone product and I didn't have any association with the franchise, there's nothing about it for me in there. There's nothing about it that speaks to me.
And the pacing,
It's not saying it's not great. It's just it went from being like, let's put it this way: when I was designing the first God of War, I listened almost exclusively to the Flash Gordon soundtrack from Queen, and I listened to the Mummy Returns and the Scorpion King soundtrack from the Mummy series.
Mhm.
Those would have no home in Ragnarok, right? Ragnarok to me feels more like it is an Oscar film or something, and God of War to me is like a really fun uh, adventure movie with a little bit of pathos, and which is not to say one's better than the other. It's just that for me, Ragnarok was not made for me, so I didn't really spend much time with it.
This reminds me of True Detective
oh, it's
and
awesome.
how it went from one creator to another creator and completely changed everything that made it what it used to be. Sorry, I'm not
No, it's fine.
hijacking the
Well, we'll
conversation,
give
but
it and also some of the writing. Again, it won a lot of awards for writing, and
No.
I mean, I guess it's all the taste thing, but I felt the writing in Ragnarok was a big step back from 2018's, and I don't think
Mhm.
it was just because of the pulls that 2018 had and those changes were fresh, but the relationship, the father and son thing seemed to. I mean, by Ragnarok, it was like it all boiled down to we have to be better, and every interaction with them ended with them saying this thing,
like
but
moralistic.
Here's what it is.
they kind of weren't better. Atreus still didn't listen. Kratos, I mean, they went to see the face, but he just followed along the same path in the end. And I the one thing I will say, again, this should have been a trilogy because a lot of this seemed rushed. They spent so much time on things that weren't as important to the big picture that those big narrative streams didn't matter. But the best writing in Ragnarok is in that DLC Valhalla. That
Oh
stuff
yeah, the
should have
Valhalla
been
is
in the main game.
totally the directors of Valhalla, and I didn't play too much of it, but I saw the ending and I love the ending,
It's
and
so good.
I had it's a very arrogant assumption, and I don't care. But when old Kratos was talking to new Kratos, and he says something like, or no, new the meaning age, the current Kratos was talking to TC Carson. Let's put it that way,
Yeah.
sitting on the throne,
He's just sitting there on the throne doing his
right,
pose.
and I don't think I entered the team of the writers' minds for 1 second, but because I have such a relationship with that character, when the new Kratos said to ancient Kratos something along the lines of, the gist of it was you get a lot of shit and it's not all deserved. Um, I took that line to heart, whether it was written with me in mind, which it probably wasn't or not, because I was like, I appreciate that view because, and I think the guys or two directors of Valhalla, I think they were. I'm not saying Eric couldn't do it as well. I don't know the pressures he was under or the requests that he was being asked to follow, but I thought Valhalla felt more like a traditional God of War, and that's not just because holy shit, you're doing the cage push and over the shoulder. I thought that was really fucking, really fucking cool. But am I getting them mixed up? No, it was called Valhalla.
No, it
But
was.
here's
Yeah.
what I was going to say though: is I saw this with Twisted Metal, right? Twisted Metal 1, Twisted Metal 2. Me and Scott and Kellen and the guys out in Utah and Santa Monica. Those were our games. We fought a lot, we disagreed a lot, but ultimately they became the essence of what that series is. When new developers came on, and they did an amazing job given the situation, which a lot of people don't know, but they understood the surface of Twisted Metal. So it's like, it's the wacky clown. Let's make him wackier. Let's give him little people clowns to be. And it's like, no, there's a darkness about Twisted Metal, even when it's like a comic book. If you take one away, especially if what you're taking away is the darkness, then it just becomes a bunch of 40-year-old old men trying to be hip, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, we can't do
God
that.
of War, I think, similarly, everybody, I think correctly so, once that we got around to 3 in Ascension, we're like, all he's doing is yelling. But he I'm not saying Kratos was ever some big, deep character, but in God of War 1, he went through an arc. I mean, he was a very angry, vengeful guy. And, he did reach some kind of conclusion. He wasn't happy, but, he moved a little bit. And then Corey played with that in 2. By the time we got to 3, it was almost like, oh, we know Kratos. He's the big angry guy who's violent. And it became more cardboard than even it was with the first 2. I think with Ragnarok, maybe there was a similar thing going on where Corey had done such a good job of stamping this new identity that they kind of felt the need to go, oh, we know who this is. This is what people like about him. So let's do that again.
Right.
Versus
Instead
a
of
real
progressing
or having a real central vision of like, this is my, I'm Eric or I'm whoever's making that call. This is my vision of Kratos now. I think it did feel like there was a little bit of a backsliding because it was just trying to revisit the greatest hits kind of thing of the last game.
To pull back to 3, I mean, 3 was the payoff for 1, 2, and 3. I mean, by 3, even the gamers were just like, I want to see the carnage that is ready. I mean, by the end of 2, they're storming Mount Olympus. We kind of have an idea of what's going to happen. But there's an arc there. By the end, Pandora, the hope, and what Kratos chose to do with it. I know in that developers panel, the ambiguity, and it's funny because I listening to Stig talk about it, it seemed like he almost didn't have an idea of where that actually ended outside of the ambiguity. He did say he had an idea for a longer ending, but he didn't expound on that in that panel.
I remember asking, because I had left Santa Monica by that point. I remember asking, where did they get the why is hope inside Pandora's box? I don't understand.
It was the last thing left.
Well, yeah, but what it really was somebody told me who would know that the producer of the game was really inspired by Barack Obama and his whole hope message. And he really shoved that into. Now, is that true? That's what this person told me. And this person would know because they were there. But that's what I heard. I didn't dislike the ending.
I got Mega Man behind me doing that exact thing right now. So.
Right. So, who knows? But
I mean, that's interesting. I never got that, obviously.
But again, that's kind of like goes to the Sweet Baby thing. It's like a lot of these people think that these creative processes happen in this beautiful bosom of undisturbed creativity. And it's like every product is influenced by shit that is obvious and not obvious. So you can love the ending of God of War 3, but it's possible, based on what I've heard, that if it wasn't for the Barack Obama hope thing, that wouldn't have been the ending. So, it's forced diversity.
Obama.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like,
and the one thing I will say,
it's like it works or it doesn't work. That's all you have to worry about. And if it doesn't work, that's important. But you don't know the motivations ever behind this shit. You just
it's very complicated. It's all very complicated. So many moving pieces. Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what, though? Let me tell you something. I got to do this real quick. I'm sorry, but I got to do this. Because I was talking to Victor about this the other day with Electric Playground. And I said, and we talked about it a little bit on this show. I was just like, I like to show the reality of making creative product, but I understand not a lot of people want to see how the sausage is made. But here's the problem with that. Because Victor was like, yeah, there were some performative aspects to it, and we like to celebrate the good stuff and all this stuff. We didn't want to shy away from the negative stuff, but we wanted to promote the positive stuff. It's like, that's fine. But what you do is you raise an illiterate group of fans who believe the PR.
Yeah.
And so when the PR tells you this is why something was done, because it sounds more flowery and intentional, but in truth, it was because, the president's wife was fucking an Obama supporter. Or a Trump, who did he go up against? A Romney supporter. I'm just saying, these are things that happen. Fucking a Romney supporter, and suddenly I'm going to fucking put hope in this game. And whenever you hear about it, you'll know it was a fuck you to my ex-wife. Whatever. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying that this stuff imbues everything. But it's okay if you don't want to hear about it. But what you don't get to do then is when you attack a group like Insomniac's narrative writer today online is getting attacked, who was writing Wolverine, for explaining the actual Sweet Baby experience and going, you guys don't understand it. They literally are acting like they know more than she does. And she's fucking writing the goddamn game that she's working with Sweet Baby. So it's like, you guys can keep flowering up the PR if you want, and you guys can keep pushing back on me when I say the Hideo Kojima documentary. Hideo Kojima comes off great in it, but it's a load of horseshit. It's a bunch of performative myth-building horseshit.
Oh, I have some backstory on all that. Yeah, sorry, I won't even.
But you can push back on it, and you can act like, Jaffe, you're ruining the fun. It's fine. But what you don't get to do is act like you know more about the shit that's going down than I do, because you're consciously choosing to be ignorant because you would rather live in the fantasy world, which is fine. But just fucking own it. So.
Yeah, but I mean, but that's not what we're here for. I mean, that's not what I'm here for.
Why not?
Like, people are always like, you hate everything. I'm like, I don't, but I'm not going to just tell you everything's great. Like, it's that meme again, like, consume stuff. Like, don't think about, like, it's like, there are a lot of ugly truths. And I feel like sometimes people want to like cover up ugly truths with ugly lies, like,
sure.
Like, to make the ugly truth more palatable. I don't know. Like, it feels like, and I guess maybe that's the motivation of all conspiracies, but I haven't seen the Hideo Kojima.
No, I haven't yet. I want to, but I could see it.
I did talk with David Hayter once, and that was pretty interesting.
It's very much in line with the Grounded 2 documentary and the Raising Kratos documentary, which is, I know those people, there was some truth in there, but it was so manufactured and so edited and so manipulative that it's not a really realistic take on making a video game. It's really, and that's okay if you know it, but so many people don't. And then they think they've got the inside skinny, and it's like, don't fucking come at me like you know shit. You go back to, I don't come to your job and tell you how to make donuts, do I? know. So don't fucking tell me you know more than me about what's going down when it comes to making fucking video games.
Well, I
And
want to
certainly
get to
not the
that
writer
because
of Wolverine.
I really loved in that developer panel. You go into your original idea for this whole narrative path of God of War originally, and I want to get there, but let's just finish up on the writing aspect. Um, because I wrote a lot about it. Like Eric, I'm a critic by nature, and I tend to write about things I'm passionate about, but I have issues on, and Ragnarok just seemed to be one of those ones. And the change of director, unwritten past, what Ragnarok left behind was, and what 2018 really did well, and I think what a lot of people loved about it was those old threads, like the pullbacks, the callbacks to Greece, and really what Norse knows about Kratos as a character, what brought him here, how did he get here? Like, we're still, after 2 games, the Norse trilogy is supposed to be done. We still don't really know how he got here. This entire journey starts with his wife dying. We don't know how she died. Isn't that fucking important? They touch on this.
No, I mean, you could argue that can eventually be told. It doesn't. I mean, you don't know much about James Bond's wife, but you know she's a driving factor to certain aspects of his motivations. But I would agree, there's a point to tell that story, but it doesn't have to happen now.
The only reason I found that important in 2018, I didn't, but by the end of in Ragnarok, there is this massive optional area in Vanaheim that you can go to. And there is these narrative pulls that all have
Is that where the Norse Disneyland is, in Vanaheim?
Yeah.
It's actually called Vanaheim?
Well, Vanaheim's the world of these other set of gods, the Vanir. There's the Aesir, which is like Thor.
Not
Odin.
Valheim.
Did I?
I don't know. You said Vanaheim.
No, I'm pretty. It's Vanaheim. Helheim is hell. People are correct me if I'm wrong.
You're talking about this.
Sure,
so continue. I'm sorry.
Anyway,
I'm out of my league on this. Yeah.
The Vanir gods, but there's this optional area in Vanaheim called I think I'm wrong. It's called the Gorge. It's like 15 hours of content that you could just completely omit.
Right. I heard about that. Yeah.
In this is this story, because in this optional area is this frozen bolt of lightning it's a harken back to the intro of Ragnarok that Kratos and Thor make.
The crater.
Right, sorry. I said the Gorge.
And it is Vanaheim. You're right.
Thank you. God, this old fucking brain, it still works. Look at this thing.
I've never heard of it all, but
yeah. And in this, there's this narrative that Thor fought against your wife. And it's very, very, very vague. Okay. But if that this matters to the story, if there's some background here, it should touch on why she died. And there's all these callbacks in Ragnarok to do with your wife and all this stuff, but it's left unfinished. Likewise, we don't know how he got there, how he met her. To me, this stuff was important. And in Valhalla, all that stuff is brought back. I just felt it was such an important part of the 2018 experience. Like, when we finally get to Tyr's Temple in 2018 and you see these urns and vases of Kratos, and you're like, wow, they know who he is. And this is extremely interesting. Why do they know who he is? It's never finished. And then you get to Ragnarok, like, okay, we're going to see this culmination of all of this stuff. And you just don't. They know who he is, but they just continue that obtuseness.
I mean, again, there is a lot. I mean, yeah, here's what I will tell you. I can understand that maybe a lot of things were planned that didn't get done, whether that's because of COVID, whether that's because of budget, who the fuck knows, or they just didn't think about it. I don't know that. But what I will tell you, though, is the bigger guilty act of all this then is that you would have thought that by the reviews and the gushing of the critics that we were in the presence of a new play by Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Right. That was my issue. It wasn't an issue, but it's like, you guys are so easily, I guess, paid off. I don't think they're paid off, but I mean, it's just like,
it's a version of paid off, though. It is.
I don't know if I think a lot of them want to work in the industry. I don't know what it is, but it's like, it's like,
you don't
why don't you have any? Go ahead.
I've been to a few of these critic thing. You know, they bring the reviewers in. Like, it's not like they're getting actually paid off, but there's access. You don't want to lose access, like
Well,
me losing access, getting blacklisted. You don't want that. So you also you don't want to piss off fans. So there's this pressure not to piss off fans. There's so many elements that go into why a bunch of critics would gush over something prestigious like the new God of War. The
the first
2018
one, I
was
agree. I
the
agree.
2018 was like such a big hit. So now the critics want to say there's this rush to say, oh, this is so great also. And there's so many motivating factors and incentives that go into that as a critic. And that happens across different mediums. And it's not
But
because
why?
of monetary, like Sony's like paying critics, but there's all this stuff like flying critics to the review thing, paying for their hotel, paying for their flight, paying for their dinners, parties. I've been to some crazy parties that are all paid for. It's just, the industry is, it's schmoozy. It's capitalism, man. It's so there's reasons why this happens, and there's reasons I don't fully understand why it happens, but
Well, I don't like it regardless.
I
Let's just
don't
put it that way. And
I
I'll
don't
tell you
either.
what, I know you guys usually don't live stream and I'm ignoring the chat, but I got to read this to you because this is the crux of it, I think. And I think you would want to hear this from this guy. He says critics want gaming to be more. He says if gaming is more, it makes more money. Y'all don't see it though. The ignorance of that statement. The most profitable games are not the
No.
more games. They're not Last of Us, and they're not God of War. They are
No.
Candy Crush. They are Call of Duty. They are Madden.
Well,
they
critics
are
aren't making money
they're
off of those.
Fortnite. Right? Yeah, but the idea that it's but he's saying that the game itself makes more money if it's more. And
Oh
I'm like,
no.
no, you're
Yeah, no.
simply wrong. Most people, if they want a great story, why? I mean, I want you to think about this. This is one of the reasons I kind of lost interest in trying to tell story in games, at least the traditional way after God of War. If you want a great story, go watch a movie or read a book or watch a play, because
Yeah,
that's
fucking
what
A.
they're there for, right? Because think about this. If you say, okay, I want to tell a story about this guy that discovers this creature in a river by his cabin. Okay, well, it's just not a great story, whatever, but that's the
Well,
opening
I
of the
actually
story.
like this story. This is going to be in my next tabletop game.
Right. So, but the problem is with the video game, in a story, it's the guy wakes up, he looks in the mirror, he has an internal monologue where we learn a little bit of something compelling, and then he grabs his fishing rod, and the next thing we know, the scene is set at the lake, and he's fishing, right? Yeah. In a video game, now you've got to come up with all this fucking filler of how he gets from the front door of the cabin down to the fishing hole, right? The story doesn't want that. There's a reason that stories are not documentaries, but they're stories and they go from scene to scene to scene. And so unless you have figured out a way, and I'm not saying it's not possible, it probably is, to make that walking journey a meaningful part of the narrative. And I don't mean talking heads like walk and talks. I mean, like it's actually, something's happening. Then it's clear what the better format is for telling a linear story. And it's just, there is this, I don't know where it comes from, and I don't want to be arrogant and paint it like it's insecurity on the part of certain gamers. It feels that way, but I'm sure there's another explanation that's less mean. But it feels like they really just need these games to be like they want it to be seen as something important, so they don't feel shame about what their hobby is. I don't know if that's true.
Well, I think that, again, this goes back to when I was talking about interactive storytelling versus traditional storytelling, and why that's such an important distinction to make. Because, like, yes, if I want to sit down, I can read a great novel. Like, I can read, or a great series of novels. I can read Game of Thrones or something, right? I get all that internal monologue and all the elaborate characters. You can never do that justice in a game with a budget that makes any kind of sense. But I can play Elden Ring and I can be involved in a story that is totally my own in a way that I never really am in a book or a movie, where that, because I'm interacting.
To be fair, and I love Elden Ring. It's my favorite game of all time.
It's a fucking amazing game.
if you don't admit, not you, but if you don't acknowledge that, why one of the reasons Elden Ring is able to do that work where the narrative lands without any cutscenes, the heavy lifting has been done by Tolkien. It's been done by Martin. It's been done
Right.
by all these things that
Absolutely.
have fed into the public consciousness about what a
And
fantasy world
then
is.
those game designers have done such a very good job of creating the environmental storytelling and
Right.
just the visual storytelling that captures your imagination. And
Right.
honestly, I think it's like there's studies that like LSD is more potent for people who have read a lot of books and have like an active
Mm.
imagination, as opposed to people who haven't. Like it's the same thing. Like you play Elden Ring and you have a rich uh, history in reading Tolkien and you have a rich history in like all these other mediums, you're going to have a more satisfying experience, I think, with Elden Ring or a game like that,
Right.
because you're bringing all of that story with you into that interactive medium that is video games. And I think
It's
that's kind of what video
funny.
games do a different
And the one thing I
thing,
just want to
you
say
know?
to address the commenter there, if it was about the money, Hiroki Totoki Literature Club wouldn't be losing his shit on the margins that Sony's games are currently pulling, which they're not pulling very high. Like we saw the insight of Spider-Man
Right.
2's
Right.
margins with the licensing cost, but these big tentpole games aren't making the money that they're supposed to be making. We talked about this last episode, the inflection point of both Xbox and PlayStation. They're different, but they're both at inflection points. And if Sony's going to keep doing what they want to do, something has to break. And don't get me wrong, I love these games. I ultimately don't care how much money a game makes. If I love it or if I hate
Sure.
it, not budget, money making. And I don't understand why people give a fuck about any of this stuff. I hear it about MCU films and DC films and this did this. Oh, it's this. I mean, since when does popularity beget quality? I mean, some of the most popular shit in the world sucks. I mean, I guess to me, I, you know what I
Well,
mean? It's not the barometer for quality anyway, but I mean, it's not bigger is rarely ever better in video games, and I'll die on that hill. Bigger can be better, but the for every Red Dead Redemption 2, there's 20 other games that just fall the wayside, and you're just like they're bloated for no reason. And I don't understand that entire thing with games at all, and I
well, it's
never.
because sure, it makes total sense. It's not. It's because the money. It's because it costs $70, and you got to get your look at
Right.
the Call of Duty hate you guys were talking about. Probably a big portion of that critical hate of Call of Duty 3 is because it's coming from people that mostly play the single player, and
Which
the
is
single
4 hours
player
long.
of
Yeah.
Call of Duty 3 was 4 hours long, and it got hammered for it. Now, I haven't played it yet. I own it, but I haven't played it. I loved the last Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 single player. I thought it was a lot of fun. I love the one
Yeah.
before that. I
Yeah,
like
but
single player Call of Duty.
I've put 1,000 hours into the multiplayer. You know what I mean? Like to me,
I
as a
understand.
critic writing about it, I take that perspective of like, does this work on the way that like it works for 99% of
Right.
players? When I read a critic that says the campaign is short, this gets a 5 out of 10, I'm like, do you not even understand why people play this game? I mean, yeah, sure,
Right.
some people play it for the
I mean,
campaign,
I
but we
prefer
play
the
it for
campaign more, but most people
sure,
don't.
but
Most,
most
yeah,
people don't. So what's the valuable critique or whatever? You know, like I don't know. Call of Duty is its own beast. That's like its
but
own
I want to
leviathan
bring
of
up though, just real
games.
quick,
But
going back to
yeah,
Tolkien and
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
though,
Go back.
because
Yeah,
you were talking about LSD and
yeah, yeah.
well, no, and the idea though of the heavy lifting being done by so many outside things that are not given the credit for the teams are standing on the shoulders of these people that have done a lot of that narrative building. Well, there's a game that just came out, wonderful game, a couple of weeks back called Ultros, and it feels like you've stepped inside Timothy Leary's fucking head at the heyday of the LSD movement in the
Ultros.
60s.
Okay.
It's a Metroid game. It is, but I don't even know where the story's going. You arrive in this very trippy blacklight poster looking environment, and there are these weird fucking characters, and they're like, you get the sense maybe you're living in someone's coma or a subconscious. I don't fucking know what's going on in that game. But that's a game that doesn't benefit from any heavy lifting done from anything else. It's a totally unique original world. And it's a really, someone, when I go back to critical studies in games, when I talk about that, it's like, there's a part of me that would love to write like a paper on this, because when you encounter a totally unique world in a video game where other medium that's better at crafting narrative doesn't exist. And you're left to the devices of the game itself to tell the story. It's really interesting how little people respond to it.
Yeah.
There was a game on PS3 called like El Shadar or something. It was like a black, white,
the
black,
Metatron.
white or
I
dark
loved it.
light. I loved it too, but it was
It was
such
all
a
over the
weird,
place, but
it
I
was a
liked it a
weird,
lot.
trippy environment, and it's a cult hit. But I'm just saying that it's like, it's so worth acknowledging this stuff and questioning why is it that game is able to connect and be lauded for its writing when the people who are writing those laudits, I don't know if that's the word, if that's the noun, are the ones that they should be calling out the backs upon which that particular narrative structure came from, which wasn't the game. And the ones that are really original, they never write about. It's just frustrating.
It's tricky too, because one of my favorite games, indie games ever, is FTL. And
Yeah.
FTL is just like, holy shit, what an amazing game. And of course everyone was like, it's like being in Star Trek, and it is. It's like being in Star Trek, but it's not at all like Star Trek, the show, or the movies. It's like you have to make those choices yourself. It's a totally different version of being not like watching or reading a story, but like partaking in a story as the character in the story. And that's how video games so often differ, from other media.
They're very different things. And Sony at some point, and I was probably contributed one of the bricks to this path, started going down this path of let's make the games feel as if you're watching the movie and you're playing the movie. Whereas I've said this before, if you're actually Indiana Jones, you're not having the adventure that Indy's having that you're watching.
Right.
You're having you're reading a map and you're lost. And, there's a difference between making a game that makes you feel like you're watching Indy and that you are Indy.
Yeah.
And I think Sony has kind of done a lot of we want to make games that make you feel like you're watching.
Yeah.
And they're great. They're great. I love a lot.
They're great in their own way. Yes.
Yeah. But I do think that really has replaced a lot of people's perceptions. And it's nice to see of what a great game is. It's nice to see something like Breath of the Wild come out. Well, not Breath of the Wild. What's the new one? Tears of the Kingdom come out.
Sure.
And it was so gameplay centric. That
innovative and experimental.
Couldn't deny that power of the medium, and I just think it's so disrespectful when I hear people like this guy in the chat, like, "Oh, this is more. Games need to be more." It's like, motherfucker, they are more.
More what? What does it mean?
I think they need to be more of what they are, of what makes them special. Aping someone else's medium doesn't make them that medium. It just makes them a pretender to the throne. I'd rather go out and get your own fucking throne.
Yeah, I mean, if the game earns it and it's warranted, more is fine. But if we're talking hours played and size of world,
no, we're not. We're talking the resonance, I think, of the game, or the emotional heft, or the intellectual.
I'm more directed towards the commenter. He's just more.
Well, I think
I'm not sure what he means when he says more.
It's hard to say. I do think that there is a contingent of Sony fans that wants Sony games to have like HBO premium TV heft, I mean, that sort of prestige.
Of the three of us, I'm fine with a lot of this stuff. I really am. I would like to see more variety of the Helldivers too. Yeah. I suppose I don't have as much issue with these big experiences because I've loved most of them. If not, some of them do wear out their welcome. And I do welcome the innovation change, but I've just accepted that most of that is happening in the indie space. So I get my fix there too. But I mean, writing wise, I'll just wrap up the Ragnarok stuff before we get into the other questions I have for you. I mean, since you didn't finish, I don't know how much this is going to land with you, but
you bring up Ragnarok. I don't have much to say about it. I mean, I barely played it. I played it for like 6 hours and I moved on. So
just the titular, I mean, everyone was pumped about Odin and Thor, and I think I'll probably get the most heat for this, but I really felt that the writing did an injustice to those two characters. Outside of the beginning of Ragnarok, where they're incredible, that's never matched again. Thor specifically becomes this drunken disappointment to everyone in his life throughout the game. And I guess maybe this is my own projection of what I wanted from the character, but he never, like, Thor is supposed to be something. I know it's supposed to be mythologically more accurate, but his wife hates him, his fucking kid hates him, his dad Odin hates him, and then spoilers for, I don't know, we are talking about this, so I assume you don't care. He gets one-shotted by Odin at the end, and it's like, is this really Thor is introduced in this game, has this weird arc where he sucks to everybody, and then he's one-shotted by Odin. I just felt there was this massive disrespect uh, to the character, and we don't even get to use his hammer as well. And it was just, it was a letdown to me. And Odin was a letdown too. And I know a lot of people loved him. He was supposed to be cerebral, but I wrote this thing about how actions, showing not telling, is what matters. And they tell us about all these things he's done, but when they show him on screen, he's acquiescing to Kratos all the time. He just doesn't seem like this intimidating villain they continue to tell us about. And all the information, there's this great facade, again, spoilers, of Odin taking the veneer of Tyr, the Norse god of war. And he plays that part throughout the whole game until it finishes. And but ultimately, Odin in Ragnarok fails at everything he does. The only thing he does in that game is kill Brock, the blue dwarf, who, depending on your opinion, was a mid to not that important a character to me. I mean, he was cool, he was funny, and I know he crafts the spear that you go on to kill Heimdall with. But other than that, he was kind of just a side character in a sideshow. And that's all Odin accomplishes. Through that entire facade as Tyr, he doesn't equip Asgard for the war that he knows is coming. He doesn't steal the thing that he knows he needs for this crack in time that is never explained. It's this, MacGuffin that is never explained at the end of the game at all. It's this massive thing that Odin wants to do that Atreus is a key to, and it's never explained what it does. Okay. And at the end, it's like, and then just dies. They kill him in front of the same cabin that Thor is killed in front of, and that's it. And I just felt it was a lot of tell and not show with those characters. And outside the beginning, it lets them down. And to me, villains matter. In the Greek arc, Zeus was this ever-present thing. Ares accomplished these feats before you finally defeat him. They gave us these things to live up to before we defeated them. And it just seemed to be missing in Ragnarok. And it probably would have benefited a lot more if the game was a trilogy, to build these characters up, introduce them, let them do some shit before we kill them. That's where I end.
Yeah. See, I'm like Jaffe. I
I
didn't
know I'm
play that
talking
much
to
of it.
myself
So,
here, but
so you are pretty much talking
You
to yourself.
are, but I
My
think
problem,
that's
my
telling, because I cared about what you just said as much as I cared about it when it was happening in the game, which is
yeah,
to say not much. I don't mean I
I
don't care
mostly,
about your personal take. Of course I do. But in terms of, I'm just like, I don't really care.
yeah, I don't really
Because
care.
because it wasn't written to care.
Yeah.
I wasn't made to care. I
and
cared
that's the
about it.
problem. I
Yeah.
wanted to care, but it wasn't
I'm kind
written
of
to
bummed
care.
out that Christianity took over the Norse religions in the Middle Ages. That bums me out.
Well, we can get
Just
to
'cause
that
I wish we
because
had a little more competition in European religion, but we don't, because it's a monopoly
Jaffe,
now.
in that developers panel, we'll move to that. You expound on, I keep using that word. I don't know why I keep using that word. Sorry. I'll
Good
get a
word.
new word here. You go on about your original narrative plan, what you and Corey had for the story. I don't know if you want to echo it here in Cliff Notes, but it did
Very,
have to
very
do with
Cliff Notes. Yeah.
with with Christianity at the end, and the three wise men and the guiding star and things of that nature.
Correct. Are you asking me to
I'm
do a quick
asking
Cliff
you to
Notes or
tell
no?
me, yeah.
So God of War, the trilogy was going to be that Kratos. We end God of War 2 and God of War 3. He goes up to Olympus to fight as it begins, and he confronts Zeus in the first 10 minutes of the game. And it is one of the easiest boss fights in video games. He just fucking kills him. And people were like, what the fuck? It's like, yeah, motherfucker, don't fuck with me, right? So he's dead. And then there is basically a vacuum uh, for all the Greeks, all the people who worship the Olympian gods. And so that opens up a door for all these other gods to come in and try to sort of fill that void. And Kratos gets the idea that I'm going to get them to all fight. And he creates this massive war of all these gods. And what that really does is Kratos has figured out the way to actually kill a god, because he realizes that just chopping off their head, they'll come back in some way like they do, is to get man down on earth to stop believing in them. And to get man to do that, the best thing you can do is get the gods involved in their own bullshit so they ignore man. And so ultimately the gods die because man kills them because of their neglect towards man. And then we're like, yay, Kratos wins, and he takes the Blades of Chaos and he slits his wrist as a callback to the first suicide in the first game. And he ends up on the boat with Chiron going across the river Styx. But then it turns out that man will always, which I don't like this message, but this was the message, man will always need something to believe in. And so new gods will always be created. And so we end with the three wise men. I mean, it's the newest religion, so there were other religions there, but still, you're controlling the three wise men as a unit, moving across the desert, following the North Star to the birth of Jesus. And then Kratos basically realizes, okay, this is just, it's never going to end. And he makes peace in the epilogue with his fate, which is basically he is death. And so they take the Blades of Chaos and they melt them down in the river Styx, and it becomes the scythe of the Grim Reaper. And Kratos becomes the Grim Reaper. He literally just becomes death. And that's how we end it. That was the plan. It wasn't like a set in stone plan, but that was the path. So
that's interesting. I mean, I love that. And two of the pantheons you seem to focus on was Egypt and Norse, if I'm correct.
Certainly, we were going to get them all. I mean, we weren't going to get them all in the same level of fidelity of Norse.
But you'd allude to them.
It would be like cameos. It's like, there's a god from, I don't fucking know, whatever.
Roman, Jupiter and Mars or something like that. Or
yeah,
Japanese. That's, I mean, I love that idea. Just to
Assassin's
wrap up,
Creed, God of War. Just kidding.
What's that? Dawson's Creek.
Just Assassin's Creed, God of War.
I thought you said Dawson's Creek, God of War.
Dawson's Creek, God of War. That would be no. This has to happen now. I'm doing it in Mid-Journey right now.
And you don't have to answer this question at all, but there was a point where what you intended the story of the original God of War to be about was a man consumed by his work that loses his family. And it seemed very personal, your answer.
I didn't intend. That's what was happening in my life.
Okay.
And it wasn't until the end of the game that I recognized, this is why this is important to me. And that's why these are the threads of the story I fought to keep in. I don't consider myself a writer, certainly not a good writer. I have written, and my things I've written have been successful at varying degrees, and co-written have been successful, but it wouldn't surprise me to learn, I think I have learned, that a genuinely good writer has a good idea of their theme, even though they'll discover a theme as they write. I just, all this shit ends up coming out at the very end. I'm like, oh shit, that's what I was trying to say. It's kind of more like therapy than actually going in with a theme that I have locked down. Not because I have some process, just because I'm not a writer. I don't have that discipline.
I think a lot of writers are the same way, though, honestly. You don't always go into something with a clear theme or a clear idea, but often through the process, you discover it.
Yeah.
Or you discover things, like that you didn't expect to discover, like you hopefully, if you're a good writer or a good storyteller, maybe not writer, but a good storyteller, you discover things that you weren't expecting to about the story, but also about yourself. And that's what makes it, resonate with people who consume or read or play your game, So,
yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
My last question, just in regards to this, and we'll wrap the God of War discussion, is I know you don't regret it now, but part of the reason you walked away from God of War, you saw a lot of people making a lot of fucking money, and outside of Sony, that seemed to be and some of the freedom as well. Were there any moments after that you regretted walking away?
No, I was, I think I would have regretted it if I had finished God of War with the team and I had felt like, oh my God, you know, this is the future of storytelling, or, you know, if I really felt we had cracked the nut and we can tell all kinds of stories like this and all that shit. And instead it was like so much work for me to basically come to the realization of, it's like, you know, if I really want to tell stories that move people and I want to do that work, which it turns out I didn't, why would as I've said before, it's like wanting to be a wonderful chef, but instead of going to work at a 5-star or 4-star Michelin restaurant, you go to McDonald's. And it's like, why are you, if you really want to tell stories and have foreshadowing and thematics that have, you know, resonance years later when people discover what you were saying and all that, you could potentially do that through the interactive medium. And there are signs of that working from time to time, but the way you've proposed doing it via your contributions to God of War is really just kind of like, like I said, it felt like we were cribbing off somebody or cheating off someone else's test, which were, let's make our stuff like movies and then we can be like movie people. And it's like, well, that's not honest. If I really want to use the medium that I'm in to express an idea or express a narrative, then it seems to stand to reason that that medium should be the best medium for what I'm trying to express. And when I realized that wasn't the case, I was like, oh, it's all about gameplay. But I was a better narrative game designer and writer than I was a mechanics-based guy. So that never really worked out. So, but no, I once I realized that, though, I was never like, oh, and I get it. I understand people don't understand it, because if you haven't gone through the journey, it's like, how could you not want to be, you know, Neil Druckmann? Or because I used to be Neil Druckmann, right? Or I used to be Cory Barr. I was that guy for a limited amount of time in the zeitgeist of gamers and console gamers. And I understand that it must seem from the outside looking in like that's the greatest thing in the world. I want that. And if you want to make video games, you might. But I wasn't having any fun. This is more fun than that. So people just have a hard time believing.
Well, and it wasn't
that
the only thing you did. It wasn't the only thing.
I started 2 companies, co-ran them. I made like 4 games in between after God of War, 5 games after God of War. I was working, but I'm good. You know, it's people have a real hard time believing it.
Well, this goes back to what I was saying about like people always saying to critics, you know, well, if you think you could do it better, why don't you just go do it? Well, maybe that's not what I want to do. Like, I don't want to make a video game. I want to talk about a video game. That's what I have. Yeah. Like, I have fun playing it and then talking about it. I don't want to go make it. Like, I don't want to, you know, it's like
nightmarish unless you love it. Oh, it's a horrible job. Right. It's so hard.
Yeah. Hugely time consuming. And like for me, like it's just, or a movie or whatever, it's like, I mean, sure, that could be kind of fun, but you look at like Roger Ebert or something. He was a great critic. He did make a movie, but a film. His quality, his best work was his criticism, and that's its own kind of talent, you know. And yes, he was remarkable.
And it contributes to people. And look, there haven't been a lot, but there have been some. I'll call them reviewers because they weren't critics, but there have been a handful of reviews that have hit. One, and I remember them. One was a guy named Owen Good from, I think it was Polygon, who did a review on Drawn to Death. And, you know, they gave it a 4 or a 5. Well, IGN gave it a 4 or a 5, and they just were assholes. He gave it a 4 or 5, and I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Right.
That's really
that was good
smart
criticism. Yeah.
Right. And then another one was Eurogamer when they reviewed Calling All Cars. Out of all the reviews, and it got really good reviews, that game, but they gave it, I don't remember, it was like a 6 or 7 or an 8, something in that range. And I remember reading it and going, oh my God, that's so smart. If we ever make a sequel, we have to do that. That's really, I can't believe I didn't think about that. So I appreciate it, the critics in that sense, in a lot of senses, if they're, you know, bringing attention to things in the medium. Like I could see, you know, I got to take the dog out in a second. I mean, I love the idea, you know, as an English major, of looking at, video games as metaphor, mechanics as metaphor. I think Brenda Romero, who did Train, I mean, you know, she's done a lot of things, but, you know, she has a book or a series. Train was a thing in a series called like The Meaning in the Mechanics or something. But, you know, even though I don't think the creator of Pac-Man intended it, you can easily look at and enjoy the exercise, the intellectual exercise of looking at old arcade games as metaphor. Pac-Man is a metaphor for capitalism. You know, it doesn't mean that's why it was created. It doesn't mean you need to think that to enjoy the game. No one's trying to belittle your intelligence if you don't think that. But there's something about the exercise of engaging with someone else's art in a way of how and why is this affecting me, and how deep can I go
Absolutely.
about why it's affecting me, and what does it mean about me? And it can be a very personal thing that, but I don't know, man. People just, I was raised with that. My school taught that. My college taught that. My high school taught that. A lot of times today, it just kind of feels like a lot of kids or people on the internet, it's like, hey, shut up. That's dumb.
Well, I think that goes back to that whole concept of authorial intent, and how nowadays it's all about like who is saying it rather than how it affects you. And an interesting experiment is to like write a short story, give it to a bunch of people randomly, and then tell each group that it's a different author and tell them about their background. Say that this story was written by a poor black man from the inner city, and tell another group this is written by a white woman from the suburbs, and tell another group, and then see how they respond to that based on authorial intent versus how they respond to it based on how it personally affects
even
them.
If there is no right answer, the right answer is the exercise of thinking that way. If you watch the Kojima documentary, the best part of that documentary is a throwaway line where he talks about how scary his dad was and how he clearly didn't get along with his dad. And he literally said he was a scary man and he died before he got into video games. But then suddenly you're like, oh, well, now you look at something like Metal Gear Solid and the cloning, and the big boss and the father and all this. It's like, that's interesting. It doesn't mean that you need to know that, but it's interesting. It's fun. It's satisfying to think about art that way.
And then you think like how somebody from a different background who plays that game might be affected in a different way than another person, regardless of what they know about Kojima's experience. That might resonate in different ways based on your own experience.
That's very, very true.
That's what interesting criticism or interesting just conversation about a game or a movie or whatever, that's what that elicits,
So I'm going to go take him out.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Do you have to go right now, or can I just?
I'm going to go right now.
Okay.
Unless you're done. I didn't know if you want to talk about anything else.
I have one last question to ask before we wrap it up. We've gone a little long here, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, I got to get going here myself.
Yeah,
so.
What's your last one?
11 my time, but my personal, I think you got one more game in you, but I'm not even going to let you answer that. That's just my personal take. But my last question is,
I do.
Well, it's great to hear, and I'd love to play it, and I want to see it. I just. And this has been an absolute joy. I'd love talking to you, and I hope you come back because I feel like there's so much more we could talk about just about God of War, let alone everything else we've touched on today. But my final question, I've implemented this with the guest we've had, which is you're only the second. But it is, let me ask him, what is the one thing we're not talking about covering or focusing on in video games that we should be?
Who is we?
The royal we.
Like
no,
gamers,
universal way.
And honestly, anybody in video games. I mean, the people that matter, the people that make them, the people that consume them, the people that talk about them. I don't know.
To what end? I mean, what does
it matter?
Mean by
it could
that?
be anything big or small.
I'm apathetic. I don't care. I don't mean that disrespectfully to the
question.
It's fine. Like I said earlier, I would love for people to be more interested in the critical studies aspects of video games. I would love for people to be more open-minded about, even if there is no authorial intent, how do these things affect us if we actually just get beyond the surface? But I mean, who gives a shit? We're not going to be dead in 60 years. I don't.
Sooner than that.
Maybe people have said to me, I was talking on Colin's show actually, and it's like, oh, Jaffe's a nihilist or he's a defeatist. And it's like, I'm not, I'm quite happy. I like being alive. I love people. But I'm not going to pretend. For me, not for you. You can have your own worldview, but my worldview is it's like, everything doesn't really matter. And I don't mean that means like I'm depressed and I don't engage with life. It's just like, I can't care that much about too much. There's some things I really care about, and the rest I'm like, hey, I get to be here. This is fun. But I don't.
We are nihilists, Lebowski. We don't believe in anything. No, I actually,
could be.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
I used to care so much about things like religion or God or like all that. And I've gotten to a point in life where I'm very much in the same boat where it's like, yeah, man, like here we exist. Here we are. Let's do
Maybe
it.
that's.
Like,
I think there's some point where you get enough of a peek behind some kind of veil, whether it's the veil or just a self-manufactured veil, where you go, you're not going to know what's going on. This could
yeah.
we could have no free will. This could all be a simulation. We are molecules banging together and giving the illusion of existence, whatever that even means. It's like, really, you're going to worry about, this thing? No, just fucking
Sweet
relax.
Baby Inc., motherfucker. Who gives a shit?
It's fun. It's entertaining to talk about, but I don't really give a fucking shit what they do. If think about it, it's like what you guys were saying at the beginning of the show. If you can't find a video game to play these days that
you don't like
floats your
video
boat,
games.
then fuck you. You got your problem is not Sweet Baby Inc. Your problem is you don't know how to fucking turn on your computer or your phone and find some shit to play, because there are games.
so many
I've done shows. There are games out there made by some of the worst fucking racist KKK motherfuckers in the world, where you're going into like Jewish hospitals, like the Columbine kids, and I support their right to exist as a First Amendment, supporter. But trust me, there's a game for everybody out there if you look. So I'm not worried about Sweet Baby doing much damage. There's a lot of other games.
Exactly.
Well, and on that note,
on that happy note,
awesome. Like, Javi, I mean, I would love to have you back. Hopefully, you're open to coming back.
I loved it. I love talking. Let people know, because we've had on and off. We got a number of people watching. To find this show, because this is going to be an actual podcast they do about every week.
It is infrequent.
Okay, so but if they want to find where that show is, what's the best way to find you guys?
So audio. Apple and Spotify, it's just Game Night with an exclamation point. That's how you find us.
And
Eric,
I'll put a link in this live stream after
we'll
I put in
the audio and the YouTube link, but we use Eric's YouTube.
Yeah, you can come to you can come subscribe at my little YouTube channel. It keeps growing slowly.
Yeah.
Hey.
So YouTube, Eric Kane, or is it Diabolical?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, it's Eric Kane. Just Eric Kane YouTube. Yeah.
And then we have a Substack, Game Night something, I forget.
Substack. Yeah.
And we'll add all those links, but I really appreciate it.
Anytime, have me back. I had a good time, you guys. Thank you for hanging out with me. I appreciate it, and good questions. And everybody watching live, thank you guys. I'm going to take my dog out to some fecal